All right, Alex, can you please let everybody in? Thank you. All right. Everybody's in, Alex?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Good evening, fellow commissioners, staff, public. I'd like to call the Birmingham City Commission of August 24th, 2020 to meeting. Would you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For all.
Sharing the screen, we're good to go. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Boutros,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Long,
Here.
Commissioner Baller,
Here.
Commissioner Hoff,
Here.
Commissioner Host,
Commissioner Host, could you please say yes if you can hear us?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Nikita,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherman.
Yes.
Thank you, Alex. We'll go to proclamations, congratulatory resolutions, awards, appointments, resignations, and confirmations, administration of oath, introduction of guests, and announcements. First announcement, as we all know, all city offices remain closed to the public. All departments, though, are accessible via phone and email. We're full operation. Payments may be dropped off using the convenient drop box that is located behind City Hall and accessible via the police department parking lot of Henrietta Street. Our 2020 summer property taxes are due Monday, August 31st, 2020, and must be received in the treasurer office by that date to avoid a penalty. I'm pretty sure every one of us is looking forward for that date. Due to COVID, our mail delivery service is very slow and unpredictable. Therefore, the treasurer's office recommends that you either drop off your payment in the drop box located behind City Hall, or you can pay online using the Pay My Property Taxes quick link that is located on the city's website homepage. If you pay online, you can use a credit card and pay a 3% convenience fee, or use the free e-check option. So if you do write a check, it will be free. If you charge your credit card, there'll be 3% convenience charge. But you can also use this link to check on the status of your payment with the city. And please always feel free to call, direct our number if you need any assistance, and where to go on our website, as we're always here for you. Our Baldwin Library is still open to the public. Building capacity is limited though, and people are asked to limit their stay to 45 minutes. Public computer use is restricted to 30 minutes. Masks and social distancing are always required. The library is open on its regular schedule, 7 days a week, and is also offering curbside pickup service to patrons during limited hours, which are listed on the library's website. As usual, as always, we keep encouraging the public and everyone to sign up for our email distribution system to receive the latest information from the city. You can do this by going on our website and clicking on the box in the lower right corner of your screen to sign up. And please, I encourage everybody to do so, as you always be informed of every little detail that the city is doing. Next, our city clerk's office would like to remind voters to turn in their absentee ballot applications if they wish to vote by mail for the November 3rd, 2020 general election. To review your specific voting information, you can visit Michigan, which is mi.gov/vote. Persons 16 or older that are interested in learning more about elections and assisting the community could always work on election day, and we encourage you to do so if you can. Visit the Elections Inspectors tab on the clerk's website for more details on bhamgov.org/voting. That will conclude our announcement for tonight, and we move on to our next item on the agenda, which is our appointments. And the first appointment goes to the Historic District Study Committee. And I see Ms. Joy Cantor is joining us on Zoom. Good evening, Ms. Cantor.
Good evening.
I'll give you the floor in 1 second, Ms. Cantor, and an appointment as a regular member to the Historic District Study Committee to serve the remainder of a 3-year term expire June 25th, 2022. And Ms. Cantor, as I mentioned, is with us. I welcome you to introduce yourself again and tell us why you wish to continue to be on that board.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I live on Lakeview. I am the only home on Lakeview that is a single shared gravel driveway next to a Wallace Frost house. I have a nice house, but it's not a Wallace Frost, but I love my home. I bought it 7 years ago when I got divorced, and I came here with my 3 dogs and 2 kids, and I've been very happy being here. I've always loved Birmingham forever. I was here as a renter back in my days after I completed college. I lived on Purdy for a while and in a flat on Henrietta. I majored in art history, but I never finished college. When the divorce came about, I thought, okay, I got to get a real job. So I went to MSU Extension and became a master gardener. And I am just, between my love of history, art history, and the city and the integrity of the city, and being one of the people that fought for Lakeview to at least continue to have blacktop when they decided to redo the streets. There was a lot going on between concrete and blacktop, and I was kind of swinging back and forth, and I was the final vote that said, okay, I'll sign the deal if we can fight for blacktop. And I believe that it just keeps the integrity and the beauty of this street. I really want to be on the committee because I feel that preservation is paramount, especially here in Birmingham, to the extent that we can keep it. And I'm so interested in it, and I have such a passion for it that I just want to devote my time and get involved and help. I love volunteering, but volunteering doing gardens is not the only thing I want to do. And as a master gardener, you do have to do a lot of volunteer work. But I just feel that I could add a lot and be very helpful. And it's just something that I really desire and have a passion for.
Thank you, Ms. Cantor. With that, I'll bring it back to the commissioners if they have any questions for Ms. Cantor. I see a hand raised, Commissioner Hoff. Go ahead, please, with your question to Ms. Cantor.
Well, it isn't to Ms. Cantor. I have a question. Is Ms. Cantor applying for the position that expires June 2023 or 2022? That's one question. And secondly, we have a member of the committee whose term expired in June of 2020.
I saw that.
Um,
I'm applying. I would love the long term through 23. I'm at home. I work out of my house. I do a little bit of travel, but not a lot. I'm always here in Birmingham 4 seasons of the year, unless I run over to London to see my daughter. So I would be very committed to the position. I feel very passionate about it, and I'd love the longer term if possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cantor. Any other question for Ms. Cantor by the commission? None? Thank you, Ms. Cantor.
Welcome. Thank you.
Commissioner Host. Could you please unmute yourself, Commissioner Host? We cannot hear you. It seems like he's nominating, but let's see if we can hear him. Now, here we go. How about now? No, you're still muted, Commissioner Host.
Microphone volume.
How about your microphone volume? Here we go. Okay, now you're
Can you hear
unmuted.
me?
Yes, we can
I
hear
hear
you.
you. I do
Go ahead.
hear you.
By the way, Joy, the fact that there weren't a lot of questions shows how lucky we are to have you.
Oh.
I would like to nominate Joy Cantor for the historic. For the Historic District Study Committee, and the term expiring June 25th, 2023.
23.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, there's no other nomination. Commissioner Sherman.
I just want to ask the clerk, did we advertise for that position, or did we only advertise for the one expiring in 2022?
Cheryl was helping me with setting this one up, so I believe it was to serve the remainder of a position that expired in 2022. But I can't remember exactly, and I don't have it all in front of me right now. So I thought that it would be a position that was serving the remainder of a position that someone else had surrendered, because it says the remainder of a position expiring in 2022.
By the way, I'm happy to amend my motion if that meets with everyone's approval to the year before.
Yes, Commissioner Host, I think the notice was, just got clarification from our city manager, just for the sake of the clarity. The notice was sent out to answer Commissioner Sherman also specific question for both the 22 and the 23.
Perfect.
And that was the question. But you can still nominate her, Commissioner Host, the way you did. You don't have to repeat that. You don't have to.
Okay.
With that, will the clerk please call the roll on the nomination?
Yep. Commissioner Host,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Baylor,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherman,
Yes.
Mayor Boutros.
Yes. Congratulations, Ms. Cantor. And please, you need to be sworn in, but unfortunately, because we're doing a Zoom, the clerk will follow up with you for a certain date, and she will coordinate with you how to do so.
Wonderful. I have one question.
Go ahead.
When I did see the availability for the position, I noticed that there were 2, and I was under the impression that one started this year in 20, and then one, I think they both started sometime in 20, and one ended in 22, one ended in 23. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. We just clarified that, Ms. Cantor, and the clerk will make sure when she swears you in, she will definitely tell you the exact year, but it will
I'm
be
very excited. I thank you all so much. I'm
Welcome.
so thrilled. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening. Congratulations, and thank you for making a difference in our community. With that, we go on to our next appointment, Advisory Parking Committee. And we have two applicants that already existing members of the Advisory Parking Committee. One already existing member for as an alternate and the other as a regular member. And that's what we are appointing. One for alternate member to serve a 3-year term to expire September 4th, 2023. And the other appointment for the Advisory Park Committee to serve a 3-year term also to expire September 4th, 2023, but that's a regular member. And with that, we'll take the applicants as they're listed on our agenda. Miss Jennifer Yurt. Yurt is with us, but I don't see her personally, but let's see.
Hi, good evening. I'm here.
All right, we see you. How are you? Good evening, Ms. Yurt.
Well, good evening, Mayor.
Ms. Yurt, please tell us why you're still interested in sitting on the committee, and tell us more about yourself. And
Sure.
the floor is yours.
Sure. I have been a Birmingham resident for 16 plus years. I moved here from the East Coast. And I was very excited to get involved with city government. And this was kind of my first foray into city government or learning about it. I'm an attorney by trade. I work downtown Birmingham. I live in downtown Birmingham. Obviously, 3 years ago, parking was much different than it is today. But it's evolved where we are today. Unfortunately, no one's parking anywhere. But it's been very interesting. I've enjoyed my time on the advisory board. It's always kind of new things pop up. I like kind of getting involved in city government. So I wanted to reapply and see what the next 3 years bring.
And just for clarification, Ms. Yurt, are you reapplying for the same as an alternate member?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, I'm an alternate currently.
Thank you so much. Commissioners, any question for Ms. Jennifer Yurt? I see none. Thank you, Ms. Yurt. Please stand by for a second, okay? We're gonna hear from the second applicant, Ms. Lisa Kruger.
Hello.
Also already an member of the committee, and please tell us why you wish to continue and tell us a little bit of a background for the public to know.
Sure. My name is Lisa Kruger, and I both work and live in Birmingham. It's about almost 10 years for each of those. I represent one of the larger agencies within Birmingham, my employer. And so I think I have a good perspective on parking from a resident perspective and an employee. My kids belong to Birmingham schools. I volunteered many times through either the Junior League of Birmingham or through my employer within Birmingham, the city of Birmingham. So I just enjoy being really active in the community, and that's why I'd like to continue on in this position.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kruger. So you're just also, for more clarification, Ms. Kruger and Ms. Yurt, they're both applying as also a downtown employee, just for the record. With that, I'll leave it up to the commission if they have any question for Ms. Kruger. Commissioner Hoff has a question.
I don't have a question. I have a comment.
Yes.
Both of these ladies, I think, are very well qualified and have already indicated their interest, and we appreciate their volunteering. But I'd like to make a point that Parking Advisory Committee is a very important committee, and we need representation from other areas, you know, from people. Both of these ladies primarily live in the same area. I realize Ms. Kruger is also employed in downtown Birmingham, which is good. But I am just making that comment that there are several members of this committee from the same neighborhood. And it would be nice if we could get a little more, and I believe well, the only other position that's open is a restaurant owner. That's the only other open position. But I wanted to make that comment to encourage anyone who's interested to keep an eye on this committee, because it's a good idea to have people from a little different areas.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your comment. Any other question or comment from the commissioners? Commissioner Baller.
Yes, Mayor, I have a question for both of them. I was hoping, two questions actually. Number one, do you recall the 2018 downtown parking plan? It was a study done by an outside consultant. So that would just be a simple yes or no. And then if you do recall the plan and you read it, what stood out in that plan as, to you as one of the more important or significant recommendations for improvement of the parking system?
I will start. I'll give the floor to Ms. Lisa Kruger as you're the last nomination. We'll start with you answering, please, and then we'll give the floor to Ms. Yurt to answer both questions. And the first one, simply yes or no, and then the second one, if you please need him to repeat the question, then you can ask me. If not, go ahead with it.
So the answer to the first question is yes, I do recall that plan. And while the times are very different now, and my perspective might be a little different now than it was over in 2018, but I did find that one of the most critical aspects was the community growth and the expanding of the additional businesses coming into the area within the first floor of the city area businesses being more focused to offices rather than restaurant and retail. That was an area of concern, as well as the walkability. And then, of course, our parking structures, the condition of them, as well as the development.
Thank you, Ms. Kruger. Ms. Yurt, if you'd like to add or echo, you go ahead and answer the questions, please.
Yes, so I do recall the study. Obviously it touched on all different areas of parking. Parking certainly was a challenge at that time, and just kind of exploring opportunities for expanding parking in existing decks, or, whether it be building a new deck was obviously a hot topic last year. It was interesting to just kind of see what other cities do as far as allowing parking in expanded areas, or we were considering even offering shuttle service to downtown Birmingham, which, the Parking Advisory Board, considers that to be kind of a challenge. But, it's interesting to get a perspective from different cities like a San Francisco, and I know that the consultants work all over the country, so they provided some good ideas that I think we all kind of considered and see how it would apply to Birmingham.
Thank you both for answering the questions. Any other questions? Good to go. Any nomination? Commissioner Hoff, I see your hand, and Commissioner Sherman, I'll give you the second call, please.
I'll nominate Ms. Kruger as a regular member of the Advisory Parking Committee, who is a downtown employee.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoff. Commissioner Sherman, go ahead, please.
And I will I'll nominate Ms. Yurt as the alternate member.
All right. Any other nomination? None. All right, awesome. With that, we'll take them in the order they were nominated. Will the clerk please call the roll on Ms. Lisa Kruger for the regular member to expire September 4th, 2023.
Commissioner Hoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Host,
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherman,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Baylor,
Yes.
Mayor Boutros.
Yes. And thank you for both again for your commitment and making a difference in the community. And as you heard me earlier with the first applicant, you would need to be sworn in. and our city clerk will follow up with both of you to coordinate that.
Mr. Mayor, we have to do a second roll call.
And then before we do that, correct, we need a second roll call for Miss Jennifer Yurt, please. As the alternate member to serve a 3-year term to expire September 4th, 2023.
Commissioner Sherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Ballard?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawk?
Yes.
Commissioner Host?
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long?
Yes.
Mayor Boutros?
Yes, and congratulations again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Next, we go to our appointment for Greenwood Cemetery Advisory Board. And we have one applicant, Ms. Pam DeWeese. Is Ms. DeWeese with us?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, Ms. DeWeese. The floor is yours. Tell us why you're interested in
Okay,
the position.
I'm here. The reason I would like to do it is because I have a great deal of interest in the cemetery. I was on the committee, on the board, and then I had to step off because of a conflict of interest with my husband being on the commission. And now that I don't need to worry about that anymore, and I would like to get back on the board. My initial interest in the cemetery was fueled by the fact that when I was at the History Museum, I organized and led many of the tours of Greenwood Cemetery. And so that's it.
Thank you, Ms. DeWeese. We appreciate your interest again, since there's no conflict of interest. I'll leave it to the city commissioners if they have any question. Commissioner Hoff, go ahead, please.
I think we're very fortunate that Mrs. DeWeese is interested in getting back on the Greenwood Cemetery Board, and I wholeheartedly nominate her for this position.
Nice. All right, Commissioner Host, you have a question?
I don't have a question so much as I consider Pam Mrs. Birmingham and her hubby Mr. Birmingham. So if we can't, entertain them, then shame on us. I mean, we're so lucky to have you, Pam.
All right, awesome. I think we are entertaining them. Commissioner Nikita might have something to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to add this is recognizes, and I think with Pam coming to us, it identifies and clarifies, I think for our support of her, the importance of institutional knowledge on different aspects of the city. Clearly, that's of high value versus someone who doesn't have that long-standing understanding of the whole process and how things have happened. And I think we're very lucky to have her come back and bring that depth and longstanding history. I think it'll be of high value to this committee.
That's awesome. Any other compliments? Well said. With that, I think we will have the clerk please call the roll for Miss Pam DeWeese, as she's been nominated by Commissioner Hoff for the term to expire July 6, 2023 on the Greenwood Cemetery Advisory Board. Go ahead, Alex, please.
Commissioner Hoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Host?
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita?
Yes.
Commissioner Sherman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long?
Yes.
Commissioner Ballard?
Yes.
Mayor Boutros?
Yes, and congratulations, Ms. DeWeese. I am very thrilled you're in good health and you're still willing to contribute to us. We can't thank you enough.
Thank
And,
you.
Alex Bingham, our clerk, will be in touch with you to coordinate how to swear you in.
Okay, thank
Have a
you.
wonderful evening, Ms. DeWeese, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, with that,
Thanks.
now, our next, unfortunately, we just saw you, Ms. DeWeese. You were not on the video, but now we see you. But have a
Oh.
wonderful evening. It's all good. It's always good to see your smile. All right. With that, we move to our next item on the agenda, which is the open to the public for matters not on the agenda. And Eric, please help me if I miss anybody. Do I see any hand raised? Any of the public, if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand or push the raise hand button on your computer. And I will search further with the help of our IT and manager. If you see any hand, I see Mr. Bloom. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. Okay, thank you. I have a couple of comments. The first is, I've noticed in the last two meetings, what I viewed to be considered as personal attacks by one commissioner against another commissioner. And I thought we had a rule about making personal attacks. And I just thought that I would let everyone know that it was noticed, and maybe that's something that the commission wants to take up and discuss, because it was disappointing to see happen. 1 second, please. The second comment I'm going to make is that during the workshop that we had with Coco Seward, which was excellent last week, I made some comments about the need to, and my belief, the importance of keeping good meeting minutes and records of what people said, and not just the votes that were taken. And after the meeting, I had an additional thought, and it was borne out by what I consider to be some really one-sided reporting done by the downtown. And it seems that they have an agenda with their reporting, that we have not been fortunate enough lately to have had good media coverage of what is going on in Birmingham city government by the eccentric or downtown or other organizations. And so because of that, I think it's even more incumbent upon the city to try and do whatever they can to have the best record keeping possible, so that residents have a way of going back and finding out what happened other than just reviewing the tapes. That's my second comment. The third comment is, with COVID coming up, or with winter coming up, people have been able to go outside and enjoy our parks and everything. And in the winter, it's going to get cold and people are going to be stuck indoors with this horrible disease that isn't going away. And I don't know what we can do, but maybe we can all start thinking about ideas or things that we can do to make our public spaces more accessible, the library more accessible to people, maybe put some heaters out in the park. It wouldn't be inexpensive to do that, but whatever we can do to keep public spaces open and make them accessible during this winter, I think would really be appreciated by the residents of Birmingham. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom, for your comment. Any other public comments for matters not on the agenda? Okay, I don't see any. Can we second that you don't see any? Okay, good. We move on to our next item on the agenda is consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion when approved by a roll call vote. There'll be no separate discussion of the items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered under the last item of new business. Commissioner, do we have any items that you'd like to be removed? Commissioner Hoff.
G and H.
D and H. Is it D as in David or G as in George?
G as in George.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. Okay. Any other commission would like to remove an item? Okay, seeing none. Can I have a motion? Or public? Any item to be removed by the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Commissioner Sherman, go ahead.
I'll move the consent agenda excluding items G and H.
Second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hoff. Commissioner Hoff, would you like to discuss those as now versus?
Let's take the vote first.
All right, let's do the roll call vote first. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Sherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Hoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long?
Yes.
Commissioner Baller?
Yes.
Commissioner Host?
Yes.
Mayor Boutros.
Yes. Now you can answer the question, Commissioner Hall.
Yes, I'd like to do it now.
Go ahead.
Okay, on item G, which concerns emergency expenditure of the purchase of ballot drop boxes, which I think is an excellent idea. Being an election inspector, and I worked the last election at City Hall, I saw the need for a box for ballots that was much more user-friendly, let me say that. So I'm very much in favor of that. I'm wondering if there are any photos of how these boxes would look. We're purchasing 3 different ones, one for ballots and one for payments. And what's the third one? Oh, well,
Oh,
forms of
plans
payment,
submittals.
community development, the third for community development. Are there, and I would ask Mr. Valentine, are there any photos of what these will look like? And what will well, I see the wording for treasury forms and payments, official ballot drop box, but the other one, the only thing it says on the invoice is 30 K-Series ballot box custom. I don't know what that means, what the wording would be.
Go ahead, Mr. Valentine. Go ahead.
Yes, we do have photos of those boxes. Essentially, they meet the ADA height requirements, which is, I believe, around 56 inches. And then they are approximately 24 by 24 inches for the 2 boxes that will be used for the ballots and the tax payments. The community development box that's going to be used for plan submittals is going to be a little bit larger. I think that's about 30 by 32. And I think still about the 56-inch height to accommodate ADA. So effectively, it's going to look like a mailbox, to give you an idea.
Okay, like the blue mailbox, not one on a stand. It's not going to be on a pillar.
No, it'll sit on the ground.
Okay, and so what is the wording on the third one? Because on the invoice, it's not clear to me. I doubt that it's going to say 30 K-Series ballot box custom. It specifies
Referring
what
to the one for community development?
It must be for community development, because one says official ballot drop box, one says treasury forms and payments, and what will the other one say?
Well, at this point, what we're anticipating is that there will be a standard language that comes on the box from the manufacturer, but we are anticipating putting specialized signage that will be custom made for the boxes, that'll be a little bit more user-friendly for the public to identify specifically what goes in the box and where to insert it and how to access the box. So the boxes right now that we're getting are kind of just the standard box. We will be putting some custom signage on it after we get the boxes.
And what color are they?
2 of them are green and 1 of them is white.
Okay, and where will they be located? Will they all be located together?
Yes, 2 of them will be on the west entrance of the back lot of City Hall, and we're anticipating the one for community development to be put on the east entrance to keep them somewhat separated so we don't have confusion there. But the 2 smaller ones will be located when you drive up to the back lot of City Hall, so you can simply stay in your car, access the box to drop off your ballots or your payments, and then if you have plans, you'll go down to the other end and drop off your plans in that box.
That's an excellent idea. I must say, for those who weren't aware, that at the primary, it was a steady stream of people dropping off their absentee ballots on the day of the election. So I think that it's very wise to have it so that people don't have to park their car and get out and come up to the ballot box. This is a good idea if it's drive-through. Okay. Well, I don't know if there are other questions. If not, I'm ready to make.
I see another hand, Commissioner Hoff. Commissioner Baller, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have a question and maybe a comment, depending on the answer. Is there a law that the one devoted to ballots must be exclusively devoted to ballots?
Good question.
We'll defer that to the clerk.
It's easiest for Treasury and the Clerk's Department to keep their things separate. And so that's why we were color coding The white box is going to be for the clerk's office, and it's going to have, some red, white, and blue designs on it to make it very obvious that that's for voting and election things. And then the treasury box and the community development boxes are going to be green, and they're going to have directions and instructions, but it does work best for the departments if we have separate boxes to make sure that we're keeping our things separate so that tax payments aren't getting mixed in with absentee ballot applications and absentee ballots.
But if someone by mistake places a ballot in the treasury box or places a payment in the ballot box, you'll sort it out, right?
Yeah, we do. It's just,
Okay.
It works out a little bit easier for us if it's mostly sorted.
Okay, but there's no law that says you have to separate them.
Right.
Okay, so with that, my question would be, I think this is a great idea as well, and we've chosen to put one ballot box at City Hall as opposed to more than one, elsewhere. I mean, and I just wonder if any thought was given to that, perhaps putting one at the post office or somewhere else in town. I don't know where else, but strategically locating more than one of these. Was there any thought given to that?
Yes.
You want to go for it?
The answer is yes, but I'll defer it to our city manager. 1 second, please.
Well, thank you. I was going to let the clerk answer because we had that conversation and she has a strong feeling on that. So I'll let her explain.
So yes, we thought about it, and it might be convenient for some people, but it's more secure for the ballots to be as close to City Hall as possible. The location where those boxes are going to be, it's going to be under surveillance. We need to be close to the box because at 8 o'clock on election night, when we have that deadline, we have to be there. So if there's more drop box locations, there's more people that need to man those boxes on election night. So just to eliminate some potential mess or confusion, having the box at City Hall is going to be the best, safest, securest, most efficient means.
Good. Thank you very much. And one more follow-up question, if you don't mind. I assume that we intend to publicize this, right? Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from other commissioners? Commissioner Hoff, go ahead, please.
I'll move the suggested resolution for the expenditure for 3 drop boxes.
Awesome.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Sherman. Any question or comments on the motion by the commissioners? Nope. By the public on the motion? I see none. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Hoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Sherman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Law?
Yes.
Commissioner Ballard?
Yes.
Commissioner Host?
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita?
Yes.
Mayor Boutros?
Yes. Thank you, Alex. Now we go to item H, also by Commissioner Hoff. It's pulled by Commissioner Hoff.
This is also involved with elections, and it is a changing precinct 6 from the City Hall to the Community House, which I think is an excellent idea. That's where I was assigned this last election, and I know that we were able to do it in the garage, in the city garage, but of course in November, it may be too cold. So I think this is an excellent idea. I just want to I want to ask if there will be designated parking spaces for the voters. That we do that around City Hall, and I think that's a very good idea. The meters are bagged, or there's a signage on it that indicates that voters can park there. At the Community House, I would hope that that same thing be done. So I would ask our city clerk, do you anticipate doing that?
Yes, we were already planning on making those arrangements, and because this is such a big change, that's why I had that section about my communication initiatives to make sure that the people would get the information that they need. for all those affected voters.
But in the initiatives, in the communication, I would indicate that there are designated parking spots that people can park at and run into the community house to vote. Then also about the initiatives, I see that you intend to mail postcards to each person in precinct 6 who's a voter. I think that this is really this year going to take a little finesse and a decision on when to mail them. You don't want to mail them too early so that people forget where to go, which I'm sure it will happen, but you don't want to mail them too late with the problems with the post office. You want to be sure that your voters get them in time to know to go over to the community house, because otherwise they've been coming to City Hall for as long as we've been voting, probably precinct 6. So I'm just making the suggestion that you give some thought to when the cards are mailed to ensure that every registered voter in precinct 6 gets it in time.
Yes, we will. And we will make sure to bag off some of those parking spots close to the community house, just like we do at City Hall.
Great. Well done, Alex. Would any other questions on that? Commissioner Baller?
How big is precinct 6? How many residences?
No more than 3,000. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but there is at least 40% of them have already submitted for absentee ballot applications. So there will be less traffic, but with the presidential, there's still going to be a significant amount of traffic, especially with those drop boxes right there with people driving through and us doing the precinct in the garage. I don't think that's the safest scenario, and the community house is definitely going to have more space to handle if there is any sort of a wait or line on a presidential election day, so that the voters can wait inside comfortably versus, being outside in the garage.
Mayor, my thought was if we were concerned about the Postal Service, this is a small enough area that 7 commissioners could leaflet it in one Saturday morning, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for putting us to work, Commissioner Baller. Any other questions? Commissioner Hoff, go ahead.
Seeing none, I'll make the suggested resolution to approve the suggested precinct change.
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Long. Any questions, comments on the motion by the commissioners? None? Any comment on the motion by the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to our clerk. Would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Hoff?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long?
Yes.
Commissioner Baylor?
Yes.
Commissioner Host? Commissioner Host?
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita?
Yes.
Commissioner Sherman?
Yes.
Mayor Boutros?
Yes. Thank you. With that, we move on to our next item on the agenda, which is unfinished business. We have next is new business. We go under item A. We have a resolution approving the Public Arts Board report on terminating vistas as a guideline for public art in such location. And I think we have Miss Annie Vengeldoden. Brooks? Our staff, Mr. Brooks Cowan. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let me flip to page 1 for my report. Here we go. So tonight I'm presenting a report by the Public Arts Board in ways in which public art may enhance terminating vistas in downtown Birmingham. And for some background on the report, in the fall of 2018, the Public Arts Board was asked to consider artwork to enhance electrical box at Merrill and Southold Woodward in front of Birmingham 8 Theater. And after much consideration, the Public Arts Board recommended that it be painted as a popcorn box. And during the presentation to City Commission for the popcorn box, I mentioned that it was within a terminating vista. And this is defined in the zoning ordinance as a building or structure that terminates a view with enhanced architectural features. And the downtown overlay standards require that any building that terminates a view as designated in the regulating plan shall provide distinct and prominent architectural features of enhanced character and visibility, which reflect the importance of the building's location and create a positive visual landmark. During that presentation, I was asked if there were other electrical boxes and terminating vistas. I did not have the zoning map in front of me. It's been on the spot, but I mentioned that Northwood Woodward and Hamilton Row, as well as Henrietta and Maple, both had electrical boxes and terminating vistas. And so the motion was to approve the design and to also pursue alternative designs for Merrill and Southwold Woodward, Henrietta and Maple, and Hamilton Row. And then Public Arts Board was also asked to conduct an inventory of terminating vistas and provide a comprehensive study in ways in which public art can enhance terminating vistas. And this is what I'm presenting on tonight. But before I get started with the body of the recommendations, I just want to call out and be transparent about a few issues that have come up. One is that the terminating vistas were initially recommended in the 1996 master plan for downtown. And if I zoom in, the plan recommends terminating vista here at Merrill and Southwold Woodward, but the stars where it recommended it for Hamilton Row is actually where the Palladium building is, and not where I mentioned during the meeting where that electrical box is here. And so, I apologize for maybe misleading you guys there. The other issue is that the zoning ordinance map that we use and that have been using, although it was in the master plan, that star wasn't included in our master plan or our zoning ordinance we have now. So I just want to be transparent up front. There are a few discrepancies, but I think reasonable minds can defer that both of those intersections merit enhanced architectural features, and they're both prominent locations for special design. And then as a third point, I just wanted to bring up that the definition of terminating vistas may be considered to be a bit building centric, but in the case for this report by the Public Arts Board, they wanted to take a broad interpretation of the definition, meaning that a terminating vista includes the building and everything within the view of that building as kind of a broad, comprehensive perspective. So just to be transparent about those things and get to the bulk of the report, the downtown overlay has 20 locations determined as a terminating vista, and the Public Arts Board reviewed these locations as a guide to evaluate and make recommendations for ways in which public art can enhance these spaces. The report includes a map and photos of each terminating vista. And these photos will be updated once construction on Maple is complete, and the Public Arts Board wants, they'd like a nice fall day for the finalized photos in this report to go up. It's always best to not have orange cones. And after reviewing photos and talking about specific locations, the Public Arts Board selected 7 of these terminating vistas that they can add to their pre-qualified public art locations map. They generally use this map as a reference whenever they get an art submittal for art on loan or art on donation. It's nothing too formal. It's just used as a guideline for reference points where they can say, oh, I think it'd be good for this or that. And so the terminating vista locations were added to this recommended map as high priorities and terminating vistas, especially for pieces of art that may be good for a downtown urban style setting. The Public Arts Board also went through some recommended locations for public space enhancements. These places may not officially be designated as a terminating vista, but they are prominent intersections that merit enhanced design features. And so we started at Oak and Northold Woodward and Harmon and Northold Woodward because the terminating vista recommendations from '96 didn't include anything along this section. So the Public Arts Board felt that that would be nice to include. We included images of those sections. Harmon and Northold Woodward here, you have that nice Market North architecture. Maybe, with the bench or light, things could be included in the public space. For Ferndale and Hamilton Row, right now you have a parking lot with building on stilts. And if the building came through and did any renovations, we think it merits enhanced design features. Obviously, Hamilton Row with the electrical box and the historic buildings right behind it definitely merits enhanced features. For the location at Kroger, there's a sculpture there right now on Maple and Woodward. I think the Public Arts Board would like a little more lights or something that delineates the brown sculpture from the brown background of Kroger's brick. It's kind of hard to see when driving by. And again, the popcorn box, and then the south face wall of 555 is a bit blank and was recommended. And then the intersection of Lincoln and Southwood Woodward was also recommended. This spot has a nice landscaping and could be a good place for some type of sculpture or artwork. And so after going through that, the Public Arts Board recommended different types of art that could be considered for terminating vista locations and included some best practice examples for these types of arts. One would be sculptures to place in terminating vistas. They can help activate the space and create a unique character for the location. Birmingham currently has 15 sculptures throughout the city, but only one is located in a terminating vista on Pierce and Brown, I believe. It's the one in front of the parking structure. And so in the best practices, you may have a sculpture that interacts with a building, such as this example here with the blue bear in Denver. I used to ride my bike by this when I lived there, and I thought it was a spectacular piece of art. It always made me smile every time I went by it. And for sculptures, you might also have a piece that contrasts the building behind it, such as this example of the Flamingo in Chicago, where you have Mies van der Rohe's Federal Building behind it with straight black lines, and then you have a red curvy art piece to it. It creates a nice plaza. And with sculptures, you might also do some temporary installations that activate the space and make it an interesting point. These are from Austin and Toronto, I believe, at the moment, but I know that these rotate around various parts of the world. Public Arts Board also recommends artistic furniture for terminating vistas. Doing so could provide an opportunity to activate these spaces with people-oriented architecture and a streetscape design to match along with the buildings. They have this example of The Wave by D-Space Studio. They worked with the city of Chicago to do temporary artistic furniture installations as a public space activation kind of project to provide places to sit and create interesting spots in the city. Other examples include unique designed benches surrounding public trees, such as examples here. And artistic furniture could complement surrounding buildings and be used to create some unique spaces in terminating vistas. And kind of what kickstarted this whole report, the Public Arts Board evaluated artistic utilities, and it began with electrical boxes, but I believe they expanded it to utilities for lighting as well. And so painting an electrical box can be a fun, inexpensive way to kind of make an interesting spot. This example here is from the city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where they commissioned an artist to paint 10 electrical boxes throughout their downtown. And he did it with this kind of unique style. And
Oops. Is it just me or?
No,
No, I think
Mayor.
we have some technical difficulties. If you don't mind, just let's work on it. Brooks, I'm not sure if you can hear us. You froze on us, but let's give it a moment as we're fixing the issue.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that.
All right.
I apologize for, let me see if I can do a share screen. Can someone bring up the section I was on before my screen froze? Was I on the artistic utility section?
Yes.
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 Yes? Okay, thank you. So yeah, the Public Arts Board wanted to discuss, utilities for electrical boxes and lighting. And they thought that the solar light examples are artistic and unique, could be cool installations, and those could interact with, different enclosure designs for electrical boxes. Another part that was brought up is wall art, and that could include mosaics, murals, and ceramic tiling. The Public Arts Board recommends that these be especially beneficial for terminating vistas with large blank walls, and they could be temporary pieces applied to canvases or pieces of wood, or they be permanent. I included this photo of the Park Shelton on Woodward, just north of DIA. This photo is from 1974, before they built the parking structure, but that mural has been a part of Detroit, and is it's very inviting into Midtown, and I think it's cool. And they also discussed landscaping and how landscaping could be used to enhance these terminating vistas. And a good example is at Maple and I believe Park, in front of the Posse building. And it's very inviting for the city, and it works well with the building. There actually is a electrical box within that, but it's screened by all of the different garden plantings that was done there. We also reviewed the city of Seattle allows tenants and building owners to rent planter space in front of their property. And if they go through a permitting process and indicate planters, that they can create their own artistic or landscaping style. And so a part that the Public Arts Board wanted to bring up in recommending art for these locations is that there's some policy that they've been dealing with over the years, previous and also related to what they're recommending, that they wanted to address. Specifically with sculptures, issues with installation process have come up a number of times due to the unique nature of each piece. And so they want to make some policy recommendations to help enhance these terminating vistas. Installation process has definitely been a problem when the artist has passed away. And so local art museums such as the DIA and Cranbrook have people who specialize in mount fabrication and installation of sculptures. And so the Public Arts Board recommends that in doing this, the city consult with some kind of professional specialist who works with creating a mount and installing these types of work. And in regards to artistic furniture, we have city standard benches, and there's nothing wrong with them. They work perfectly fine, but I believe it's a part of the zoning ordinance policy that if someone's building a new building or they have to provide a city standard bench, perhaps this policy could be reviewed to allow maybe a more artistic bench every now and then to kind of mix things up. That could be an interesting kind of focal point for an intersection. For public utilities, Public Arts Board recommends that if something is to be painted, that the design and theme be considered on a case-by-case basis. I don't think they recommend a one type of theme to be painted throughout downtown. And then public or enclosures for these boxes are also recommended. But if an artistic enclosure goes in, it's recommended that the base be placed in the ground. The board was a little bit concerned about drilling foundations into the boxes. They don't want any water leaking in. And they also, along the same lines as the furniture for lighting, for utilities, we have city standard light poles. And Public Arts Board recommends that, maybe every now and then a unique kind of artistic light, such as the examples from the solar lighting in Portland, could be installed and could make an interesting intersection. And for wall art, currently city policy for signage prevents types of murals and wall art from going up. The Birmingham plan update recommends wall art in the rail district, which is pictured here from the plan. But Public Arts Board recommends that wall art be allowed throughout all of the city, and to do so, we would have to amend the sign ordinance, and then the Public Arts Board would also like to see a review process with the Design Review Board or any relevant board be incorporated into that. And for landscaping, DPS does a great job with landscaping. It's just recommended that when we have a terminating vista or in an electrical box or piece of art, it's recommended that special consideration be made for the types of plants so that everything comes together for a unique space and creates a nice visual aesthetic. I think the intersection of Maple and Park has always been great. This sculpture on the north side of Pierce, DPS has done a great job with plantings. And then the Public Arts Board also discussed a public notification process that right now there's no formal public notification process for art in the public right-of-way. And the Public Arts Board would like to, or they recommend an amendment be made so that if a piece of artwork is going on the sidewalk, that perhaps the building owners and tenants are notified, and there's maybe a social media post and you're posting on the website because they want to encourage public input and have that process formalized. And so, last page, bear with me here. They have a recommendation and implementation priorities. And so, number one is use public art to enhance terminating vistas. Use all the art here. Implementation would just be, recruit artists, do call for entries. Two would be revise the installation process so that we could work with a professional specialist who does installations. Number three would be revise city policy towards furniture and utilities to allow some unique artistic benches and light. Number four would be create a new policy and review process to allow murals in places such as terminating vistas. And recommendation 5 is establish a public notification process by all the relevant boards. So I know it's a lot, but with that, I leave it to you guys with any questions.
Commissioners, any question? Commissioner Baller, question for?
I'll break the ice. This is impressive. Could you give us some sense of how long it took the Public Arts Board to put this together, and who else other than you worked on it, and just a paragraph on the history, that's all.
Right, I believe that after Ann Ritchie painted the popcorn box, they started discussing terminating vistas. I think that they were very oriented towards painting popcorn boxes, so it took some prying to get them to kind of understand the zoning ordinance and kind of elaborate more on other types of art that could be included. And so it was just me working with Public Arts Board, and I think that they're open to all kinds of art and all ideas. I think they're very big pictured and excited to encourage more art in downtown.
So this is kind of your, I'm sorry, Mayor, may I?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is kind of your baby. What, safe to say? With their consent and input and all that, right?
I'm the only employee or person on staff liaison with Public Arts Board.
Okay, cool. And again, it's very impressive. And how much time did you spend? How many meetings? I think I saw in here that there were 7 meetings.
At least 7 meetings. I think they went over the photos, prioritized, and we're encouraged to consider more types of art, especially after the Crambox meeting. It was like, hey, they want more. They want you to elaborate more on besides painting electrical boxes.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Any other questions to Mr. Cohen? Commissioner Hoff, go ahead, please, with your question.
Well, first, I want to recognize the work of the Public Arts Board and say that I think this is wonderful. It's a very thorough study, and I think it's very good. And it certainly has shown me through the years how the Public Arts Board is taking a much more active role in encouraging public art, which I think is really beneficial to Birmingham. I have a couple of specific questions on art that was mentioned in the report, and I just need a little help. And Brooks, maybe you can tell me, which is the Chris Yaki sculpture? I talked to Mr. Valentine today, and we thought it was the one on the North Old Woodward parking structure affixed to the wall. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's the Chris Yaki sculpture. And it was on loan, and then was it last year that the city now owns it?
I believe, correct. The city may have purchased it earlier this spring, I thought. I'm not quite sure on the timeline of when the purchase was made. Sorry.
But wasn't it a very nominal amount? I can't remember.
It was 4,500, I believe.
Oh, it was 4,500?
Correct.
That sculpture? Okay, okay. And then what about the sculpture Michigan Spring at the library? Has that been installed yet?
Hopefully it's installed this week. We've been working with Barbara Heller had a recommendation for a sculpture installation professional from the DIA. He ran into some life circumstance. He got in an accident, car accident, and then COVID hit. And you can't install sculptures on a concrete pad unless it's over 50 degrees anyway, so it needs to be done during the summer. So I don't want to put anyone else on the spot, but we're hoping this week for the library sculpture.
Okay. And then when it was presented, the crayon box, where was that? That was on a utility box, but I can't remember exactly. Was it at Hamilton?
Yeah, Hamilton Row and
Old Woodward.
And North Old Woodward. And so the issue with that one is that as per the master plan and zoning ordinance, it's across the street from a terminating vista that I called out earlier.
Okay. I'd like to make a couple of comments on the suggestions that the Public Arts Board made. One of them was to allow plantings be done by the businesses, the adjacent business. It seems to me that we would need some oversight on that so that it doesn't have to be uniform, but I do think that the way we have the work that we're doing now on Maple and Old Woodward, our plantings are beautiful. And I'm a little concerned about that. If we allowed every business to plant whatever they wanted, I'm wondering about uniformity. So that's one concern I have. And the second was about having professional sculpture installation specialists. We've been having public art on loan for many years, and I don't know who installs it, but I think, to my recollection, it's usually the artist. So that I'm not quite clear. We may be able to be aware of a installation specialist, but I don't know that we need it for every installation, because some of the artists can do it themselves. I mean, just last week we had, at the last meeting, Lori Tennant, who said she will do the installations along the Rouge River Trail of her artwork. And so that's a savings for the city. And my last comment is, I'm aware of some cities that require when developers, when they're building a new building, they're required to install public art. Now, I don't know if it means on their property or contribute a piece of public art to the downtown area. And I think that's something we may want to consider.
Commissioner Hoff, appreciate your comments. Would you like to hear from Ms. Annie Bengal-Duran, or are you just making comments on your comments? Anything from her?
Well, if she has something to say, yes.
All right.
The commission comments, please.
Or let's take the commissioner comments first before we invite Ms. Annie Bengal-Duran to the floor. Any other commissioner comments or questions for Mr. Cohen. Mr. Commissioner Nikita, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Brooks, yes, this is it's a good summary of the concept. I think with our master plan years ago, going back now over 20 years, terminating vistas as part of our downtown plan was sort of introduced, and I think we took it seriously back then. And as we implemented the city in development in the city over the years, I think we've taken note of it both in terms of the architecture as well as in terms of the plans that we've done for artwork. And so I think this is just an expansion on that, and it's welcome. It's a personal enhancement that I find personally very important. If you ever talked to any of my students over the years, my architecture and urban design students, and you use the term terminated vistas, they'll probably roll their eyes, because I think I use the term more often than not during the course of lectures and direction on design, and it's an important part of urban design and architecture in cities. So we've embraced it well here, and surely there's a lot of room where we can take it further. So I'm very impressed with what you and the board has done, and is a good foundation. So I think that's excellent. There's a couple of things that I in terms of implementation. Of course, we like to plan very thoughtfully in the city. I think we have a long-term history of planning well and implementing with success. And so with that, plans like this, concepts like this, and initiatives that we put forth like this are important to be thoughtfully pulled together so we can implement them. So when I think about how we can implement this, I start thinking about some of the things that may end up becoming questions that we would have to overcome in order to approve and move forward. And one comes to mind with the variety of different things that are in this that fall in this package. One thing comes to mind is the idea of implementing I think Commissioner Hoff just mentioned implementing the CRAN design. So one of the things that came up in that discussion, if you recall, that was just a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, whenever it was, is that there was a question of continuity, a question of where do we want to see the general design and the aesthetic approach going if we were to do, we obviously did one in front of the Birmingham Theater, and this was the second one over there at the end of Hamilton. And the question came up as to what is the tie-in, what is the importance to the city, what is sort of, where are we going with this as a general aesthetic? And so I think that, to me, it was a question that came up, and we didn't resolve it, and ultimately we didn't approve the moving forward of adding artwork to that particular box that we needed, the utility box that we needed to look at. So I bring back to the point that are we in a better position now? I mean, obviously we have a lot of foundation to work with, but still those questions seem to be yet to be answered, or still need to be, I think, maybe studied, or maybe they have been studied but haven't been fully presented. So I asked that question with the idea of how do we implement this, and what will be the guiding principles to make decisions on what will be the artwork allowed to happen, whether it's sculpted art, whether it's utility art, meaning like seating, what have you, or whether it's graphics in some way of a mural or things like that. So I think that's an important thing to consider, an important thing that we need to get in front of. And I would just ask, as an example of the large scale murals that you pointed out, I think there are a number of places that they could be really excellent. There are cities and there are examples where, if you will, for lack of a better word, theme or ideas that are carried forward through the whole district should be at least considered, and then maybe that would help us make decisions collectively to how we go about it. Examples of that would be Wynwood, for example. I've toured Wynwood in Miami, the Wynwood district, which has a lot of it's based on the idea of murals and art, but there's a sort of continuity there. And maybe there's a reference there that we could learn from. Also, we know Eastern Market has embraced murals and things like that, which is another example locally of a lot of artwork applied in a variety of different ways on a number of different buildings. There's also a significant amount of graphic arts and color in Camden Town and London. I think there'd be an example there. And then lastly, there's been a significant amount of artwork and graphics added to the Belt downtown and the Z Deck, which is downtown next to the Hudson site. And all those are examples of where a significant amount of implementation of artwork has collectively created essentially an overall aesthetic. And I ask that question as those examples, not necessarily saying all of those are the examples we'd want to follow, but they're examples of a collection that became a unified sort of approach. And I would ask whether or not we are there yet on this, or if that's sort of the next step of discussion on what would be the guidelines for implementation as we were to move forward on moving on some of these or all of these initiatives.
For moving forward on themes related to murals, I would say that step one would be changing the ordinance to allow murals and things like that. And then within the process, they could have kind of an artistic theme discussed, while making that amendment to say, okay, murals must meet a certain theme as specified by the Public Arts Board or agreed upon if they wanted to go with the theme. Or maybe people say, do we want to review it on a case-by-case basis and have things build upon each other? So I think it sounds like that's a discussion later on related to theme. I think the Public Arts Board right now would like to see the ordinance addressed where they're even allowed, because I believe that would have to go through Design Review Board and City Commission first. And so, in order to discuss themes, I think first, make sure everyone's on board with even allowing them.
So if I could just clarify one question on that, Mr. Mayor, just to add to that. So would that also apply to, because we are allowing the application on some of the utility boxes. So that was where we got stuck a couple months ago on that one. So it's not the idea of a collective approach. It was not just for the large scale murals, which I agree with you is we need to address the ordinance and the allowance of that, but we already allow some of this in other places, and yet we don't seem to have a clear direction on what would be the guidelines that we would use to implement these.
Okay. Yes, coming back from the Cranbox, Public Arts Board wanted to elaborate on this report and definitely wanted input from City Commission on utilities and the recommendations. I think they wanted to keep it broad. And because I think they're open for anything, but if you guys prefer specifically the encasing, if you guys want to go that route, they could do that. The paintings would be more temporary, I think, because sometimes you can get a cool temporary theme and maybe you put a timeline on it to say, okay, maybe this lasts for a year, in the case like where Milwaukee is. So I think they wanted to be more open-ended.
Okay, so Mr. Nikita, I think you got your answer. I think we need, I see what Commissioner Nikita's going with as tonight. We just want to focus on whether really we want to approve the terminating Vista as guidelines to move forward. But I do echo Commissioner Nikita in the sense, but this is not the night to discuss it. But Mr. Cohen's, your answer is literally, just to be clear, if to move forward, as Commissioner Nikita said, we stopped in the middle of something right now. It's not part of our discussion tonight, but that will come back to us at a later date if or should we need or be in need of painting another electrical box. But at the time being, that would not move forward till you bring it back to us, kind of, correct?
Correct.
All right. Commissioner Nikita, is that clear, right?
Yeah, I understand it's separated, but it is tied in terms of we want to move this forward, and we also want to have something that we can implement. So I think we need to set ourselves up to figure out where that goes. And so I appreciate that. Yeah, it's not necessarily for tonight, but it's a key component for us to actually make this worthwhile and useful.
Thank you. I think it's good. Commissioner Sherman, go ahead, please.
Going further with what Commissioner Nikita was mentioning, I think that that's the reason that we ordinarily would accept this type of report. We don't adopt it. There are various things. These are the broad overviews, and then there are individual items within there that need to then be flushed out. So while the resolution currently says approve, our ordinary course for this type of report would be to accept it. With that, I'll make a motion to accept the public arts report on terminating vistas.
Commissioner Hoff, second, Commissioner Hoff. Awesome. Yes, Commissioner Hoff, go ahead. Comment on the motion, please.
Yes, in the our packet, it does say the word accept. In the agenda, it has the word approve, but it is accept. That's what the word is in our packet when it's the suggested resolution. What was presented by Brooks is to accept the Public Arts Board report. And I believe, Commissioner Sherman, that's what you said.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So it's written that way.
Yep.
But I have another comment. We have been installing public art for many, many years throughout Birmingham, and there hasn't been a theme as far as I know. And we have so many different pieces and so many beautiful pieces. Many are on loan, but some were purchased, some were gifts. And so I can see the need for a theme, maybe with the painted utility boxes or painted murals. But we have 17 pieces of public art, primarily sculptures, that there was no theme, as far as I know. Now, I'd like someone to comment on that, someone from staff. Have we had a theme, or have we been installing works that have been accepted and approved?
Who would like to answer that question? Mr. Cohen, go ahead, Brooks.
My impression is that since we've had public art, there's been no general theme in regarding the installation of the sculptures. And I think the Public Arts Board have done a few call for entries, but then also people have donated or been a part of the art on loan. And I think Public Arts Board kind of reviews what they get and then looks for a location to see where it would fit, because every piece is so different, and then so many different parts of Birmingham to put them where the piece of art can be contextual or look nice within that spot. So no theme that I'm aware of.
Oh, so Mayor Boutros, could you please then go back to Commissioner Nikita and ask him how his comments pertain to this, since we have been installing art for many, many years, the sculptures, and there isn't a theme. So how do his comments on what we would do moving forward differ from what we've been doing?
All right, Commissioner Nikita, you may answer the question, please.
Absolutely. No, it's a great question, and I completely concur with the point of all of the artwork, for the most part, that we're talking about. And to be clear about what my point was, the artwork that you're referring to, the 17 pieces, I think they're all sculpted pieces. So it's a very different thing with the sculpted pieces than it is with the graphic arts that we may apply on either blank walls or on particular items of, graphics, if you will, because they become more specific. And the reason why I brought it up is because we're now moving in the direction where we're talking about applying graphics and or art, whatever you want to call it, graphics or artwork painted on, which become very, very specific, and they become murals, if you will, or artwork or what have you. And so the reason why it came up is because I think that the idea of why I think this came up with the approval of the crayons. The issue came up directly from that, and I think the commission was not moving forward on the crayons, specifically because there was a question on whether or not the crayons had any application for any reason. And that goes back to, okay, so what is the criteria for how we make decisions? How would the Arts Board direct someone to apply a graphic or apply artwork? Is it based on color? Is it based on a certain scale? Is it based on a certain, and when I mean theme, I mean it very, very generally. I'm not advocating for that. What I'm saying is I think we need to question or ask the question of if we go down the path of expanding the art situation beyond the sculpted pieces that you're referring to, and I agree, there is no theme to that, but it's very different when you're starting to apply graphics and artwork on walls and on particular building or utility or civic items. So that's where the differentiation happens. And I'm only simply asking if we're going to have the arts board and the staff look at that as with precedent and understanding of other examples, so we could start looking at that. And that's what's being recommended or suggesting in the rail district right now with the blank walls there. I know that's one of the areas that we're talking about. So it's really a continuation of this move. And you're right now we don't, but I think that moving forward already, we're questioning what is the guidelines for basing our decision making. And I think that's the arts board's going to need to know that, and we're going to need to know that. So that's where the clarity would be.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Nikita. I see Mr. Cohen's hand. Would you like to add something, Mr. Cohen's?
So when they discussed that and whether to have a theme or not, I think they wanted to keep it open-ended and review things on a case-by-case basis, because I think they have a ton of fun reviewing the different designs. I think some of the most fun public arts board meetings of the year are when they flip through different examples of designs and art for electrical boxes. And so I think the fun and the variation that they get is why they recommend just keep things open, keep things case-by-case basis, and see what kind of art we can get.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cohen. We have a motion and seconded, but I see a hand. Before I go to you, Ms. Annie Bengal there, and I see your hand up. Let's hear from the rest of the commissioner first, and then I'll let you speak. Go ahead, Commissioner Baller.
Yeah, the idea of accepting the report, I'm much more interested in talking about how this will be implemented. I've devoted before this meeting, I devoted 20 minutes to this report. The Public Arts Board met 7 times, and Brooks put in countless hours on it. And so it deserves a little bit more time and consideration, I think, by the commission. I think it's very impressive. I've said that, used that word now 3 times. And I'd like to talk to people about it and consider it more and do more than just accept it, because I've seen reports accepted and then nothing ever happens. So what I'm really interested in is where we're going to go from here on this. And I'm also would make the recommendation that something like this could have been given to us weeks before we actually had this discussion tonight. Or we could have said, look, we're going to show this to you tonight. We're going to have Mr. Cowan talk about it. We'll have the chairman of the Public Arts Board here, and she'll talk about it. And then we're going to come back to it at another time, maybe in a workshop setting or something like that. So it just, I'm impressed with the report, but I'm not impressed with the process. And if we got into it a little bit more, I'd probably say to Mr. Cowan and Ms. Ecker and the Public Arts Board, let's talk about how we're going to implement this. What are the steps that we need to go through? What's next? And so I'm just afraid if all we do is accept it, it'll just go die somewhere. And I don't want it to die. But I, so that's.
Thank you, Commissioner Baller. I assure you that we're not going to let it die. But yes, comments other on the motion, please, Mayor Pro Tem Long.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Boutros. I also agree that this is an impressive amount of work, and It has lots of great recommendations, many of which are going to require the city to change its ordinances and develop review processes and determine whether we want to have committees or juries or whatever. And so I'd like to ask if this report has been shared with the planning board, with the Parks and Rec board, with the design review board, and if it hasn't, I would like to recommend that it is shared with them so they can comment. And we can get an idea of, for example, for design review board, what ordinance do they think they would need? What would the ordinance look like that would allow, for example, murals, but not advertising, and would appropriately address protected speech issues and things like that, so that we get an idea of, from, as to Commissioner Baller's point, have the Public Works Board or Brooks, after consulting with other boards, come back to us with an idea of concrete steps for moving forward with some of these recommendations.
All right, I see Ms. Ecker's hand, maybe wanted to answer the question. Ms. Ecker, go ahead, or want to comment on the motion.
Yes, I just wanted to comment. One thing in particular, the Design Review Board has also been approached by a business owner in town about doing a mural on his building, not to advertise the business, but to add interest to a blank wall and activate the streetscape, so to speak. So this issue has recently come up. We did not share this report yet because we didn't know what the City Commission's feedback would be on it. We were certainly planning to share it with the Design Review Board so they could take that into consideration when they're discussing changing the sign ordinance with regards to wall murals. Certainly, Mr. Cowan has also been to the public or the Parks and Recreation Board on several art projects lately. Again, we have not shared this Terminating Vista report, and also the Planning Board has not seen it yet. And we would definitely recommend that because they would be responsible for reviewing any amendments to the zoning ordinance to potentially add more terminating vistas to actually get them designated on a map and so on. So we would definitely be in favor of doing that and would agree with that suggestion.
Good, thank you for that, Ms. Ecker. I want also to have our city manager, Mr. Valentine, add to the answer and comments. Go ahead, Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think in terms of process moving forward, I think there's been some good points made this evening. And for clarity, I think it's appropriate that we come back to you with a staff report outlining the process by which we move forward, because I think there's some additional elements that need to be discussed as part of the implementation part of this. In other words, there's certain elements that have costs associated with them, and I think you want to know what those costs are for those elements, so you have an idea of what you can look at going forward for budgeting purposes and other things in order to implement this plan. Additionally, I think you want to look at having a clear understanding of where these actions need to occur and which ones you want to prioritize in terms of going first. I think some of these do have implications for the planning board, and I think you want to prioritize those so that you're not dumping this as a full project onto the planning board and kind of having them trying to figure out what they want to start at first. So what I propose is we come back to you with a staff report outlining a framework for how this moves forward that you'll have the opportunity to comment on, critique, and then we can bring that back to the appropriate boards and departments to critique as well for further implementation. Thank you, Mayor.
For the clarification. Any other commissioner, before I call on Miss Annie Vengelder to hear from her, on the motion? Do I see any commissioners hand? None? Okay. Miss Annie Vengelder, the floor is yours. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to reiterate that when we looked at producing this report, that we wanted to have a very broad overview and a plan moving forward, instead of just piecemealing a utility box here or a sculpture on an existing pad. We wanted to have more of a broad overview. And to answer Mr. Nikita's question about overall aesthetic, I think it's important that we don't want to be downtown, the corridor. We don't want to be Eastern Market. That there's a certain level of sophistication in the city of Birmingham, and we have some incredible architecture that we would not want to compete with, but actually just enhance or make that viewer walk down the street. And yes, there's a beautiful, wonderful building behind, but then all of a sudden you see a sculpture that actually juxtaposes it. So I think to look at each area is to have that eye and have that aesthetic of how the two can complement each other rather than having an overall theme, but with that certain level of sophistication. I would never want to have murals on every single building. I would want it to almost be like when you're walking down the street and then all of a sudden you see this peekaboo view of something really fabulous. I think there's a way to be overdone, and then there's a way of being a little bit restrained. And with the report, we talked about expanding to not just look at sculptures, but also looking at seating or a potential bench, or maybe doing a temporary installation with light in the middle of the winter with the snow coming down. There's all these different ways to interact our business owners, the public, in ways to expose them to art.
Thank you, Ms. Van Garderen. With that, I'll bring it back to the commission, but I'd like to hear from the public if they have any comment on the motion itself. I don't see any hand. Do you, Eric? No? Okay. Bring it back to the commission. Before we ask the clerk to take the roll call, Commissioner Nikita, go ahead. What happened here? Oh, you're muted, Commissioner Nikita. 1 second.
I don't know, somebody mute me? I didn't do it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know how that happened. The question of accepting this and or reviewing it and then possibly not accepting it, I think this is part, my understanding of having, done this many times is that this is a process. We've had a lot of work done, and the motion is to accept it, and it's not to adopt it as if it were a final document that we implement. It's a move in the direction that we're going. With the gathering of what I hear from everybody, I think that's spoken, it looks to me like it's generally very well supported. And I would say that there's things that need to be added and clarification of direction and implementation as the manager suggested. But accepting this just moves us forward with what we've done so far, and it's by no means a rigid document that can't be edited to and refined. And I think that it supports what's been done to date. So I think that the motion essentially says that good job to all involved up to this point, and now there's clarity as to what needs to go moving forward, so we can make a good job of implementing these things. So I would support the motion.
All right. Any other comments? Discussion for Commissioner Host?
Yeah, I just want to say I totally support this motion. And the reason you don't hear from me is I'm married to a professional artist.
All right. Good enough. With that, any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Sherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Hall?
Yes.
Commissioner Baylor?
Yes.
Commissioner Host?
Repeat that, yes, Mr. Host. Commissioner Host.
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Nikita?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long?
Yes.
Mayor Boutros?
Yes. Okay. With that, we move to our item B under new business. We have a resolution approving the installation of dismount zone signs at the border of the Central Business District and at the city bike station in Shane Park. And I do believe we have our chief, or is it Jenna, Miss Ecker? Who do we have on this? Commander Gruey or Miss Ecker? Jenna, is that you, Miss Ecker?
Commander Brewer.
Oh, Commander Gruey.
Commander Gruey will be handling it, and I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. I see you talking and nodding your head, but I wasn't sure if you're going forward with it. Thank you. Commissioner Scott Gruey is with us with the presentation. The floor is yours.
Good evening, commissioners. I did try to turn on my camera here, but it says it's blocked by the host. So, oh, here we go. Should be on now. Good evening. So, yes, I'm here for the wheeled device restriction signage. And if you recall, back in February, the commission passed a new resolution to amend the city ordinance 74-6, which was a previous ban for the skateboards within the central business district to include now bicycles and electronic personal mobility devices. After that was approved, we went back to the Multimodal Transportation Board to talk about signage to bring awareness and compliance to the new ordinance. In the past, there was no signage for skateboards. It was more word of mouth and any contacts we had with anybody that was in violation to make them aware of the ordinance to gain compliance that way. Being that we're seeing an increase in these electronic devices, it was taken to the Multimodal Board. MKSK, our consultant, was asked to prepare a report on the type of signage that is out there and available to make a recommendation as far as what can be used. That report was viewed by the board, who ultimately decided on the dismount zone sign. After they talked about the signage, we started looking at different locations and where those signs could be installed. Looking at doing more of a minimal approach, the board discussed putting those signs around the border of the CBD as an awareness to people entering that area. It was also discussed that if there was a compliance issue, that further signage or possibly even alternative signage could be looked at to gain further compliance on that. So they did recommend the 16 locations, which are the 15 entrance points that were identified, and then also the bike station that is in Shane Park.
Thank you, Commander Gruey. With that, commissioners, any question for our commander? Commissioner Hoff, go ahead.
I'd like to ask my question to Ms. Ecker.
All right. Seatbelt on, Ms. Ecker. There's a question coming your way. Go ahead, Commissioner Hoff.
My question, I think that the signs are very clear, self-explanatory, they're very good. My concern is too much signage. How are we doing in the downtown area with signage? Because this is always a concern. You want to get important messages across, but you don't want too many signs that obscure the visual attributes of the city. So I would ask you, how high will these be? Will they block anything? What do you think?
Commissioner Hoff, Ms. Eckert, go ahead, please.
Well, I would say that the multimodal board did talk about that, and that was part of the reason why they didn't want to see them put, 5 on every block kind of thing throughout the entire city. And they talked about more or less keeping it around the outside so everybody knew coming in, as Commander Gruey mentioned. So I think that the board, the multimodal board, and most of our boards are pretty cognizant of the fact that they don't want to have over signage anywhere. But it is something that is coming up that we do want to see some indication made to let the general public know what to do. And in terms of the height of the signs and so on, I would actually refer that to Commander Scott Gruey. Sorry, Scott. But I'm not sure what the height is at which they're mounted. Obviously, they can't be mounted so you can hit your head on them, so to speak. I know that in our efforts to put up signage, we always try to utilize existing sign poles that are there if they're in the correct location before we would add a new sign pole.
So then I would ask Commander Gruey, where are these going to be mounted?
Commissioner Gruey, got a question? 2 questions. How tall and where are they mounted?
So as far as the height of the sign, there's no standard requirement regarding the height like there is for traffic control devices, speed signs and whatnot that have height restrictions they have to meet. This wouldn't follow that. So we do have some flexibility as far as the height is concerned, which does allow us then to look at mounting locations in the interest of not adding additional posts or obstructions to the sidewalks. Signage at those 15 different locations can be reviewed to see if these signs can be added to existing posts and still be visible.
Thank you.
Any other questions by commissioners to Commanders Gruey or Ms. Ecker? Yep, Commissioner Nikita, go ahead, please.
That's very good, Commander Gruey. This is really needed, and I'm glad that we're moving ahead on this. I see some very questionable and concerning movement through the downtown, specifically with specifically young people on bikes and scooters that I think have come to some very close calls in my view. And I can imagine it happens all the time. I'm surprised we don't hear about more accidents. So this is really important, and I'm glad we're moving on it. I agree. We want to minimize the signage. So Commissioner Hoff's concerns, I think, are valid for sure. One of the considerations and thoughts that came to my mind when I saw the graphic and from examples that I've seen, one example being nearby in Royal Oak, downtown Royal Oak has signs of this sort, pretty similar to what we have here, that say specifically, I think, don't walk your bike or walk bikes or what have you. And they're actually placed at the entrance to downtown Royal Oak on the concrete at areas. They're essentially effectively like decals or painted or something on the concrete. So you see it when you're walking, you see it very evidently on the concrete in these zones at the entry points to downtown on the sidewalks. So one of the questions I had was, has it been explored as an option, maybe in addition or even supplemental to the signs on posts, and then possibly to initiate this, meaning to get the public aware, both parents as well as kids, because I think the kids are more active in terms of riding in town, both on scooters as well as bikes, to just get the word out by way of having maybe signs on the sidewalk for a period of time, and then eventually they would go away. So that's just in terms of rolling this out, bringing awareness to the public, and making sure that we're effectively passing along the concerns that we have on this. Is that something that's been explored and possibly maybe a thought going forward?
Great comments, Nikita. Commander Gruey, go ahead.
Yes, actually, the report from MKSK did have an option in there that was basically the exact same sign, but did show it as a pavement marking. When it was discussed with the multimodal board, it was that minimal approach that they took as far as not trying to clutter the sidewalks with additional signage, pavement markings and whatnot, that could be reviewed in the future if we were not gaining compliance through this effort. It was also discussed with Julie Kroll from Fleece and Vandenbrick that she thought that eye-level signage was more appropriate in this, that people riding bikes and electronic devices and stuff like that are more looking forward than they are looking down. And that also typically when you do a pavement marking, she recommended that you always install a street sign with that because most people don't necessarily look down when they're riding these devices, but that this.
You froze.
Tonight.
Commander Gruey, we lost you. If you're still with us, I think unfortunately those
That are in violation of that new ordinance to gain compliance from that, and that has been effective. Things that we can definitely do and look at would be the sandwich boards that we've used in the past as a temporary measure to put out and make them aware when we install these new signs, as well as a media broadcast or publication utilizing Mary Ann with the city to put out notification of the new ordinance.
Thank you, Commander Gruey. Any other questions from the commissioners, Commander? Commander Gruey, I do have a question for you. I actually echo Commissioner Hoff's comment on the mini signage in the downtown, but I do understand also the importance of creating awareness for the people that they don't know, pretty much from residents that live in town to visitors that comes in town. If they have a bike and they bike on our sidewalks, especially, knowing how narrow our downtown. I tell you, I bike every day with my kids, my own kids. It's also risky to be on the street. Not every street. I'm considering and speaking as I'm a visitor and I don't know. Now, with that sign, now give you the leverage to enforce a ticket on a person or to give them a warning versus no signage at all? What is the main purpose of the sign? I want more of a, what is it, what the value is adding for us to give warning to the public not to bike on bicycles by us informing via a sign so you can enforce it on them? Go ahead, Commander Gruey.
Yeah, so our goal is really compliance. Really what we want to do is make people aware and gain compliance through, through that effort and not the enforcement. We definitely don't want to go out and write tickets to family members riding their bike through downtown, or kids that are on certain devices that are just unaware. So our officers understand that completely, and typically it is through trying to gain compliance and make them aware of the new ordinance. However, if we do have a habitual offender, this does give us the ability to enforce that new ordinance.
I appreciate that clarification. That's why I asked the question. Thank you, Commander Gruey. Any other Commissioner Baller? Unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, that's my concern, is like all the kids and families who, you got a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old riding their bike, and now you're sort of, I know we've passed the law. I agree with the law. My kid was always a rule follower. And if I took him uptown on his bicycle and he saw a sign like that, he'd say, "Daddy, we're breaking the law." It's like, we're criminalizing, a family activity. And I wonder, I'm not kidding about that, even though it's funny. I'm wondering if there's some way to, get the word out to the people that are problems without, sort of dampening pretty much traditional family activity in the CBD. I mean, parents take their kids on bikes in the central business district on the sidewalks where it's safe all the time. And I hate to discourage that.
Yeah, so like I just previously mentioned, I mean, our goal is just to gain compliance. I mean, our officers understand and they're under the direction that we're not going to go out and write tickets to family members doing that. In the last 20 some years I can remember, as far as having a skateboard ordinance, we probably wrote maybe a handful of tickets, and those were through your habitual offenders that have been warned multiple times. So even under the ordinance, it wasn't something we were doing. It was making people aware, letting them know what the ordinance was to gain compliance that way.
So can we put something on the sign that says, this doesn't mean you.
All right, Commander Gruey, we appreciate your answers. I just want to add to my question is, just think of the heaviest, most, I would say, and I want to say use the word dangerous by any means, but unsafe. Again, as I mentioned to you, I'm a family of 3 kids that I bike every evening through downtown. Going on south or north on Old Woodward, between the car, it's very, very difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's pretty difficult with kids at the age of 5 or 4 or 7 or 9. Now, you're requesting that I should get off my bike and my 3 kids and go on the sidewalk through downtown and just walk our bikes versus riding our bikes. Am I correct on that?
So that's correct. The ordinance would prohibit you from riding your bike on the sidewalk. However, it does not prohibit you from riding your bike in the street. Although I completely understand your concerns as far as young children and riding in the street, not so much for the traffic concern, but their own distractions that may cause safety issues. So I have 3 kids myself. I completely understand what you're saying. However, what we're looking to do then is get that family, that group of people to walk their bikes on the sidewalk in the interest of the pedestrian safety, their own safety, and people coming in and out of the stores, and just the amount of foot traffic that we see downtown.
And I do understand. It could be very dangerous also if I'm biking with 3 kids on a sidewalk. Let's go the other way. I'm not discouraging the idea by any means. I'm just trying to clarify everything to understand the pros and cons. The other side of it, if I'm on the bike with 3 kids and I have a trailer with a 3-year-old behind me that I put my kid, it's also dangerous on the pedestrian, because At one point, I could be biking a little fast and somebody in front of me that did not pay attention stepped the other way and I could really bump into them. It could be a positive thing that what we're doing tonight, and I'm all in full support if we all agree that, you know, you have to walk your bike for the safety also of the pedestrian. I just wanted to mention why we sometimes tend as a family that we bike on the sidewalk. We really, because again, we don't want to be repetitive. It's very risky to do it on a very narrow street like Old Woodward with a lot of cars behind you because the kids cannot control themselves. It's not because of the cars.
Sure.
And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Valentine. He might like to add something. Go ahead, Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment, you know, this is a type of ordinance that comes up because there's issues that come up in the everyday course of having a downtown, and not just our downtown, but other downtowns where you see these types of signs. Primarily, it's attributed to the fact that you get certain people that ride exceedingly fast on the sidewalk while you have doors that open onto that sidewalk.
Correct.
And inherently what you have is a conflict that becomes unsafe in certain situations. And I think what the police department is looking for is the clear authority to act on those issues where actions are not being done in a safe manner. I think for the families that you heard Commander Gruey indicate, where they are driving in a procession with their family and young kids, and they're typically not riding at an excessive rate of speed past those storefronts, there's not going to be a warning. It's, you know, there's an understanding that that is in effect part of the downtown core. What's not acceptable, however, is when you have other people riding their bikes excessively fast on the sidewalk that can't stop in an adequate time frame when they do have a conflict with a pedestrian walking out of a storefront. And I hear that all the time from a lot of restaurants and retail owners, that people almost got hit and someone almost got hit when they were leaving my store. And there is a concern that if you don't have the proper authority to act in those certain circumstances, that this circumstance will not resolve itself. Because I think what you're seeing is a lot of the people that are riding in that fashion are doing so on a repetitive basis. And if you can correct that behavior by addressing through a warning process first, and then dealing with the ability to cite those individuals that have repeat offenses in conducting themselves in that manner, that is effectively why this is put before you this evening. And I think that's what Commissioner Gruey has been articulating, is that it's really not to address the issues where you have, you know, the families. It's the individuals that might be riding in a group that aren't associated with a family that choose to not follow safe actions, and allow for themselves to jeopardize the public that are patronizing these businesses downtown. And it's that conflict that we want to avoid. So, you know, I don't see it as a heavy-handed approach to doing this. It really is more of a PR campaign. But in the event that it's not followed, they have the authority by having these signs to enforce it in a way that really can provide some effective relief to these concerns. So hopefully that helps clarify some of that.
It definitely does, Mr. Valentine. It's very well explained and detailed and very clear to me now. I can say safely I will take an action to drive slowly or to bike slowly so Commander Gruey would not stop me or pull me over. With that, Commissioner Hoff, go ahead, please.
I understand. I think that Mr. Valentine explained it well, but I think it is applicable to families and to teenagers, you know, who may be young teens riding their bikes downtown for the purpose of safety. A family as well. If you're riding with 2 or 3 children on bikes and someone opens a door and knocks one of your children off the bike, that's not what we want to happen. So I think that this is applicable to everyone. Birmingham has so many places to ride bikes that they don't have to be on the streets of downtown where there are pedestrians and people going in and out of stores and restaurants. And I find it applicable to everyone. I think it's a good idea.
All right. Any other comments? Commissioner Baller.
Yes, just a question, which would be to clarify what I heard. And what I heard you saying is that the signs enable or give authority to enforce, and that by inference, you're saying that without the signs, you can't enforce the law?
You can, but I won't answer for that. I'll defer to Commander Gruey with that.
So, yeah, that's not correct. So without the signs, we could still enforce it. However, it's much more difficult on our prosecutors in court when there is no notice or no signage. So this just assists our prosecutor in enforcement if that was the case. And just to clarify too, and to be clear, this ordinance was passed back in February, and this here is just to add the signage. So the ordinance is already in effect. It's just adding signage to bring awareness.
Correct. Yeah, thank you, Commander Gruey, which is true. Let's focus on the sign discussion and more than, yes, Commissioner Sherman.
So the only question here is, should we approve the installation of the signs?
Correct.
I'm going to make the motion to approve the installation of the signs.
Thank you. And seconded by Commissioner Nikita. Any comment on the motion itself, please? Do you see any hand? My screen froze. None. Any comment on the motion by the public? No, see none. Okay, bring it back to the commission. Any further discussion on the motion? See none. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Sherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawks?
Yes.
Commissioner Host?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long?
Yes.
Commissioner Ballard?
Yes.
Mayor Boutros?
Yes, thank you. With that, we move to item C under new business. We have a resolution adopting the temporary COVID-19 off-season outdoor dining standards to take effect October 1st, 2020. And we'll let our city manager do an intro on this. 1 second. I want to unmute myself.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you will recall, we previously put before you a set of initiatives for our business community, given the impacts from COVID-19. We've been constantly evaluating that going forward, and now we're looking at the opportunity for accommodations during the winter months. You may recall, too, that we put forward various resolutions allowing for some expanded outdoor dining opportunities this year because of COVID-19 and the requirements that were imposed on restaurants from the state. And now we're looking ahead because those resolutions were going to expire in October of this year. And there's nothing that would allow any continuation of that given the current restrictions that apply for indoor seating. So we recognize that we continue to have to look at new ways to accommodate our businesses in the downtown. And one of the things we looked at was this continuation of the outdoor dining. So it's just part of an ongoing effort to try to be proactive with the COVID pandemic and try to support our businesses any way we can, given the specific and unique challenges that they face. So Ms. Ecker, along with staff, has prepared a resolution for your consideration this evening, and I'll turn it over to her to walk you through that resolution. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, as the city manager stated, this goes along with the resolutions that the city commission has already adopted to allow expanded outdoor dining. Obviously, our ordinance, the way that it stands pre-COVID or without the COVID-19 pandemic, allows outdoor dining in the off season, but you need a special license and you have to bring your furniture in every single night. So if we're looking at the COVID-19 situation and needing to have more spacing between seats, it makes some sense to consider allowing that outdoor dining to continue longer into the winter season and throughout the winter season, which is what we're proposing, with some enclosure systems, which generally, as you know, pre-COVID-19, were not permitted. This would be for this season only at this time, to go from October 1st to give the restaurants time to get this set up and up and running. And then it would run through March 31st of next year, which would allow that expanded area that restaurants have applied for outside to be used continuously without having to bring their furniture and their railings and their sanitizing stations and their trash receptacles in every night. So it basically allows them to continue to function as they have been this summer with all of the new restrictions in place because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So what we do have in here is you can see that they would have to apply for approval. There'd be no charge for the administrative approval. Again, it's the same limitations on seating as we have in place now, which is if you're losing, let's say, pick for example, 30 seats inside, you can have 30 seats extra outside in your outdoor dining, and you can spread out further than just your storefront in order to do that. With this resolution, you could then have some type of enclosure system, whether it's a structure, whether it's a tent with sides, all kinds of different options. This leaves it open to allow that to be enclosed, and then heaters to be put in place so that it's more comfortable for diners to dine outside, and to give them a little more space when they're limited to 50% capacity indoors as well. There's requirements listed in Exhibit A that are attached that the fire department and the building department have discussed in terms of safety provisions that need to be in place, such as you can't have, you can't store propane, this kind of thing, to look at the structure and what all would be involved. And they would also need to apply for a permit to do this temporary structure of sorts, whether it's a tent or some type of actual temporary roof structure, temporary walls with openings, that kind of thing. So it would still be fully vetted, and it would still go through and be reviewed by the planning department, the building department, the fire department, et cetera. So we would know that it would meet all the standards, that it would be safe, it would meet all the building code requirements, it would meet all the fire code standards, but would allow businesses to expand, restaurants to continue to use that space outdoors. So just one thing I wanted to point out, though, is right now, the way the MLCC has theirs, their new or temporary restrictions, they're in place through October 31st. There's some indication that that'll extend through the year. And so as the city manager provided, this is to allow our restaurants to plan for that and to provide some extra seating outside to help them survive through the year, because we know at the time we didn't know how long this pandemic would last, but there's every indication that it's not going away anytime soon.
Thank you, Ms. Eckert. Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Before I give it to the commission for comments and questions, I just want to be repetitive on what we're doing tonight. Literally all what you're doing, as we had approved this before. We're extending the term. That's basically it. As our city manager, Mr. Valentine, stated, this is an ongoing effort. I'm being repetitive with same words he used to help our restaurants, as also Ms. Eckert said, and establishment to survive in our city. So please let's focus our discussion on that, as we've already had been through this agreement, and this is just extending the term. With that, Commissioner Baller, go ahead. Commissioner Hoff, sorry, I'll give you a second one.
Yeah, I believe there are some changes here, are there not, Ms. Eckert?
Yes, it extends the season, obviously, to allow throughout the winter, but it also allows for enclosures, and we don't currently permit enclosures.
Right.
And the language that you have that says number of seats, item number 2, the number of seats to be removed from the interior of the restaurant due to health guidelines is the maximum number that each establishment shall be permitted to add outdoors. Is that new?
No, that's the same language that's in place now.
Okay. Have we monitored that? And has there been any attempts to get around that?
We have monitored it extensively because we did have many, well, I wouldn't say many. We had several complaints early on about how these restaurants were expanding their outdoor dining. But as you know, you passed a resolution on May 11th and then again on June 8th of this year to allow that expanded outdoor dining. We have been monitoring it. Every time we get a complaint, we do go out and look at it, and we regularly inspect all of these establishments. We are not seeing, now that we have clarified for everybody that we're watching and we know what they're doing, we have not seen a problem with regards to this. And again, just to point out that they can add the number that they are taking away from the inside to their outdoor dining. So if they're losing 30 inside, it doesn't mean they only get 30 outside. It means they take what they have already outside and they can add 30 spaces they're losing inside to that outdoor area. And as you know, when you approved it on June 8th, it allowed it to expand. So it's not, if the storefront's 30 feet wide, you're not looking at just that 30 feet, but you can go a little further out. You can go into the street. You can go in front of other storefronts, etc. So I just wanted to clarify that, but that is all staying the same.
Yeah, Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead with your
Yeah, so that's ambiguous to me because, I mean, look, we had bistros, right, who had 65 seats inside. And then in the summer, they were permitted to increase their capacity. But then in the winter, they were back to the 65. And now I think what you're saying is that in winter, they may be permitted to have more than 65 seats in that establishment. Is that correct?
Yes and no, just to be abundantly clear, it's not, yes, it's allowing them to have outdoor dining all winter in addition to their 65 indoors. Where currently they are allowed to have outdoor dining in the off season if they wanted to, but they would have to bring it in every night for snowplow removal and so on, and they can't have enclosures. So it allows them to only take advantage of decent weather on decent days. So primarily, as you mentioned, they get their 65 seats inside and they must have outdoor dining during the outdoor dining season. Some of the restaurants put out outdoor dining here and there in the off season. They are allowed to do that now. Not many of them do. Right now with this would allow them temporarily during this upcoming off season to keep their outdoor dining outside and to enclose it. So to your point, is that giving them more seats year round than they would have had in another year? Yes, in terms of number of seats, but not necessarily that they're gaining a whole lot because they're losing their full capacity inside and they're spreading it outdoors. But it does allow them to keep some extra outdoor dining outdoors that they wouldn't probably have had in previous years.
So, may I?
Let me give the floor to some other Commissioner Baller, if you don't mind, and I'll get back with you. You still want to continue on your question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to be very explicit about what I'm talking about. And it appears that we are, because of COVID, expanding what it means to be a bistro. And I find I've had one proprietor of a legacy establishment with a Class C license who has a significant investment, and he's just concerned that we're giving the bistros, an unfair advantage, and he may be right, and I think we need to consider that. I've also seen what appear to me, to my eyes, I don't know if it's true or not, bars set up outside, and I'm not sure how that's addressed here or how it's been addressed or whether it's really true. But Adachi and Bistro Joe's both appear to have outdoor bars. So I just think we need to be really careful about this. Our main concern should be health, and secondarily, helping these businesses survive. But also, I think we have to consider that we had bistros, they were one thing. We had Class C licenses, they were another thing. We did intentionally limit the size of the bistros, and we might be opening it up too. So I'm done.
Ms. Ecker, go ahead.
Just two comments. I mean, to your point, yes, are we adding outdoor dining potentially for bistros, yes, but this does not apply just to bistros. This applies across the board to all establishments. So any type of quota license or Class C license or et cetera, any type of liquor license that would apply, it would add the same benefit to all types of restaurants, not just bistros. I just wanted to make sure we were all clear on that. Does it blur the distinction between a bistro and a Class C? Yes, potentially it does. With regard to outdoor bars, Adachi and Papa Joe's, Bistro Joe's, do not have outdoor bars. I know what you're talking about. I've seen the outdoor bar. I've gone there at least 6 times to inspect it myself at Bistro Joe's. It is a counter, and they did have seats, and it looked like it was a bar in the beginning. We've repeatedly told them they cannot have those seats there, and they have reiterated to us, and we've inspected that there is no service of alcohol there. They're using that as a beverage station, so to speak, for pop and water and so on, and they hand it out there, and we tell them you cannot have people sitting there and you cannot serve alcoholic beverages there. So I know exactly the ones you're talking about. With regard to Adachi, theirs is simply a pop and water and server type station. It is also not a bar. A bistro does not allow them, both of those are bistros, does not allow them to add an additional bar permit without coming to the City Commission for approval. So we have followed up primarily with Bistro Joe's repeatedly. I'm sure they're sick of hearing from us, in fact, but it's not a bar.
All right, Commissioner Hoff, go ahead, please.
I have a couple of questions. Are there any restrictions on what materials could be used for these enclosures?
Go ahead, Jeff.
In this particular resolution, no, there's not, other than what you see in Exhibit A. So it can't be a flammable material. So you couldn't go out and, I don't know, I'm not sure what to give you as an example, but I know one of the things we talked about between the building department, the planning department, and the fire department was, could you go out, you know, to Target and get some nice velvet curtains and hang them around and call that an enclosure and then heat it inside? And that's why all of these requirements came up, that they have to be flame resistant and they have to meet certain standards to make sure that it's safe. So there's general guidelines in terms of safety and code requirements, but there's no specific requirement that it must be metal or it must be flame retardant plastic, so to speak. So it leaves it open as long as it meets all of these safety and code requirements.
Ms. Ecker, if you may, I'd like to add to your answer to Commissioner Hoff. Commissioner Hoff, these enclosure systems that are allowed in our town, they have to comply with the building code and with the fire code. Am I correct, Ms. Ecker?
That's correct.
Okay, so, but go ahead.
And if you look at the resolution, Exhibit A that I attached to the back of it, it actually makes it very clear so that everybody understands what these rules and regulations are, but it would also all be subject to review and approval by the building department, the planning department, and the fire department.
Thank you.
What is an igloo? Because I saw in the responses, someone said they would like igloos, but the city won't allow. What is that?
I don't know if you've heard of yurts, but that's a good example. A yurt is this kind of semi-permanent structure that is used in parks and people camp in them. They're like a little bit more permanent version of tents. So an igloo, something like that. It's a temporary structure that you put up. People sit in it, you can heat it, and then you have basically more comfortable temperatures inside. It protects you from the wind and the weather, but it's still a temporary structure. It happens to be a dome, and sometimes you can see through them, sometimes you can't. It's literally what you picture as an igloo, except it's not made of ice.
But it's not allowed. Is that correct?
Well, we don't allow standalone accessory structures or enclosures for outdoor dining at this time. With this particular resolution, there may be some ability to do that if they were able to show us a structure and an enclosure that would meet all of the building code and fire protection measures.
One of my concerns is the reason people are eating outside and they want to eat outside and they don't want to eat inside. And if you go into restaurants now, you'll see that there are lots of empty tables, more empty than full, because people want to eat outside for safety. They think being outdoors is healthier and less of a chance to contract the virus. If they're enclosed and there's heaters and people are all sharing, breathing the same air, how is that much different than being inside?
Well, again, that's a comfort level, and I think you're right that most people do prefer to eat outside right now because of feeling a little safer in an outdoor air with the circulation. I think a lot of people will have those concerns. If we do enclose the outdoor dining, there will be a large number of people that will not be comfortable sitting in there. But what this resolution does is it provides opportunities for the restaurants to hopefully make it and allow, hopefully they can attract some others that might not want to eat inside, or that would eat inside, but there's not enough room because they can't spread out enough because the store is too small, the restaurant is too small. And so this allows them to at least provide that spaced out social distancing eating and make them feel a little more comfortable. It's definitely going to still cause concerns for many people.
Okay. And one other question. What happens if the COVID-19 restrictions are lifted in January, both for indoor and outdoor seating? How is this going to affect us?
Well, that is completely up to you as a city commission, because the reason that all of these COVID temporary assistance measures have come as city commission resolutions is because you can then change that and you can rescind a resolution at any time. So if, for instance, everything goes back to normal by Thanksgiving and all of a sudden the virus goes away and we don't have this concern anymore, the city commission can rescind any previous resolution that you've adopted in the past, which is what you did with the May 11th one when you updated it on June the 8th. So it's very easy for you to change this if you are so inclined. Obviously, there are businesses impacted by a change like that because they've invested in a plan and equipment and fixtures and so on. But it's definitely within your power that if you find out that, okay, that the state of emergency is lifted, there's no more concerns about COVID-19, we want to go back to our regular rules, you rescind this resolution and any others that are related, and it goes back to the ordinances and regulations on the books for permanent.
Would there be any benefit to approving this until December 31st, 2020, and then revisit it? Is there any advantage to doing that? I'm not sure. Certainly to rescind it after we say yes, and restaurant owners have invested, this will be a considerable investment. In fact, some of the responses to the survey say they can't do it because it's costly to enclose an area. So my thinking is there any benefit, and I'm not sure about this, to approve this through the end of the year and then to visit it again in December and decide whether to extend it to March?
I believe that's up to us, Commissioner Hopp, but I'll let Mr. Valentine also add to the answer here. Go ahead, Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just add that I think when you look at the time frame being too short, I think it becomes a barrier to participate. This program is in fact an optional program. It's not required on anybody. It's just an option for those that find it of value to be able to do this. So when we put forward the program, it's with the intention that it would be for a period of time that would allow them to accommodate the restrictions that are in place. If those change, you do have that right. But I think if you limit it to just December 31st, it may become a barrier given that the cost to implement these structures would not be recouped in that period of time, and there wouldn't be value in them doing that. And in fact, they wouldn't do it. So I think the intent was allowing sufficient time where there could be a benefit for them to operate, which is what the intent of the program is. And that's why the duration was provided as such.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Mayor Pro Tem Long, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor Boutros. I had a question perhaps for Planning Director Ecker. The cover memo says temporary enclosures, and most of the discussion today has referred to tents and enclosures, but the Exhibit A says tent structure for purposes of this ordinance, is there a difference in the requirements or approval process between an enclosure and a structure?
The approval process would be the same. The difference would be the building code and fire code standards that would apply. They're fairly similar in that they still have to be flame resistant. They have, there's all those different regulations that apply, but tents have slightly different standards than other types of structures. Would still go through the same approval process and review process though.
So just if I may continue, so a tent can be approved as a structure?
Yes, it could, as long as it met all of the code requirements.
Did that answer your question, Mayor Pro Tem Lund?
Yes.
Yeah, you may continue if you want to add. Are you okay? We're good. Okay. Commissioner Host, go ahead.
Ms. Ecker, this is for Ms. Ecker. You were kind enough at the beginning of your remarks to say that you're monitoring all of these establishments very closely. Can you just explain to us how you do that, other than being in town every night?
We have an ongoing cooperation agreement between the planning department, the code enforcement inspectors who work nights and weekends, I don't know if they work nights and weekends, and the police department. So the police department and the city manager might wish to chime in, but the police department have been going out and sending regular patrols in the evenings and later at night to make sure that there's no violations going on. We regularly go out during the day and respond to all of the complaints and do inspections during the day. Code enforcement also does that. And if we see that somebody is not complying with our requests to correct the situation, then they will go out and actually issue the violation and take it further through the process.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Ecker. I heard it myself, Commissioner Host, from many establishments in town that our crew are visiting regularly and kind of complimenting us, but also complaining that leave us alone. But we need to be compliant with everything we do in business. But I assure you that they are doing their job as I've seen them myself, and I've talking to many establishments that told me that they visit them. With that, I saw a hand. Commissioner Sherman, go ahead, please.
Going to Commissioner Hoff's point, as we're doing this, we have to take into account that what we're trying to do is provide the businesses downtown with every opportunity to succeed in this environment. The restaurants being limited to a 50% occupancy inside and finding that people don't want to go inside in the restaurant, they've moved, and we've allowed them to move the tables outside. By doing this, we're going to extend the time period where they'll have the tables outside. Whether they choose to enclose those is a decision each of the merchants is going to have to make on their own. And to Commissioner Hoff's point, there are a lot of people who won't go inside of a restaurant. And if we enclose these outdoor dining structures or create outdoor dining structures, it's going to be no different than going inside. So some merchants, some restaurateurs may decide to use heat lamps and things along those lines, blankets, which is what they do in other areas of the country when it drops down into the 20s, 30s, and 40s. So this just gives them another option. I think that the more options we can give our businesses, the better off we are. Goes to everything that we're trying to do, whether it's for businesses, the downtown, the residents. We have a responsibility to try to do what we can to assist in the current pandemic. And that goes to the next item that's on our agenda also. So with that, I'll move the suggested resolution.
Awesome. Do I have a second on that? Seconded by Commissioner Nikita. So we have a motion to and a second. Now, any comments on the motion by the commissioners, please? Commissioner Baller, go ahead.
Yeah, what's the difference between an enclosed outdoor thing, which is what we're talking about, and indoors? And if you do it right, you're going to really seal it up so that there's no drafts. You're going to heat it. So how's it different from indoors?
Well, it has to do with the permanency of the structure, I guess. And it's all relying on the building code and what the building code determines to be a temporary structure and a permanent structure. So would it be fully sealed? Yes, some of them maybe. It's highly doubtful. But that's the distinction that's made. I understand what you're saying, because to some people it'll still feel like an indoor enclosed situation. But the building code clearly differentiates between temporary structures and permanent structures by the quality and the structure and the materials and all of that goes into building it. So there are different requirements for each.
Okay, any other comment on the motion? Question? Commissioners? Seeing none? Anybody? Oh, 1 second. Commissioner, no comment on the motion. We have Mr. Henke, the public comment or question on the motion, please. Mr. Henke, the floor is yours in 1 second. Go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you. During the discussion, I'd like to make a couple of comments. With respect to Commissioner Baller's comment of the Class Cs versus the bistros, we have to keep in mind that we're talking about the economic survival of all of the restaurants, not the bistros. And it would give the opportunity, as the May 11th and June 8th resolutions have, to expand their dining on both of those instances. So it's not just giving the bistros some type of advantage over someone else. What this does is provide a viable substitute for social distance dining, which we don't presently have given the COVID conditions. Because of the space limitations for each of the bistros, what this does is give them the opportunity, if they had the space inside, will allow them to social distance and actually make up for those seats inside. This gives them the opportunity to give it the outside dining to make up for the lost seats that they otherwise would not have given those space limitations. There will be, for each of these individuals that elect to do this, a significant capital outlay for all of them, which may restrict some of them for do that, whether it be a Class C license or a bistro license. So to Mr. Baller's point, the indoor versus the outdoor isn't really the issue. What it does is essentially create what would be an indoor situation that would be acceptable under the current 50% social distancing guidelines had any of those restaurants actually had the physical space inside to be able to do that. With respect to Commissioner Host's concerns of sort of the policing or oversight, I personally, on behalf of my clients, have been in situations where we've met with the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, who have actually come out and inspected, and the health department, who has come out and inspected, to make sure that the social distancing requirements are correct, that the site plans that we've provided to both the city, which have been approved, and the MLCC are consistent with what those plan submissions are. So I think it's very important that you've taken this important step. I think it's one of those that needs to be continued, not just until December because of the additional capital outlay. There is one concern that I do have in the resolution that actually goes to the Liquor Control Commission. In line item 3, it says the outdoor dining areas must commence adjacent to the establishment. The MLCC has sort of been waffled on this, and I don't have a direct answer from them as to adjacent versus non-adjacent. And it's come up in a couple of situations. It's come up in the Adachi situation because they have both a portion adjacent to the building, and then they have the sidewalk portion. The townhouse has that exact same situation. There's a number of street side and Ely's have those situations. So I would ask that there be some consideration that it commence either adjacent to or non-adjacent to the establishment, so that it be in accordance with the MLCC, to give them the flexibility between the decks that are in the public right of way and then those situations where we actually have those few places, Purnoy is another one that comes to mind, that are actually adjacent to the premises, so that if there's a question at the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, we've satisfied that ahead of time.
Thank you, Mr. Hanke, for your comments. Any other public comments on the motion? Do I see any hand? See none? Okay, awesome. I'll bring it back to the commissioners for further discussion on the motion. Commissioner Nikita, go ahead, please.
I just want to say that I completely understand, and having been involved in the creation of the bistro ordinance going way back to the original time, and knowing the concern of making sure that we hold the line on the size of the bistro, and we've adjusted that over the years to strengthen that position so they're clearly differentiated from the Class C and the other licenses. I understand completely the concern there. I think that we will likely have I know that we've held the line based on what Jana had mentioned. Ms. Ecker has done a good job at explaining a pretty complex situation with what's inside, what's outside. There's a lot of sort of moving parts to this. In the end, my guess is that not a whole lot of establishments will invest for the months that will see this be in play, and in the end, it's not going to be a large encroachment of any substance to one side or the other. So, and in the end, it's gonna resolve itself in just a few months anyway, one way or the other. So I'm comfortable with the slight variations in the numbers that we may have. In the end, I don't think it's going to be much of an encroachment, but I think we have to do everything we possibly can to make sure that the establishments all collectively throughout the city can succeed through these very, very challenging times. So with that, I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Long, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor Boutros. I would like to ask if either Planning Director Ecker or City Manager Valentine could address the comment that Mr. Henke just made about adjacent or non-adjacent, because if what he says is true, then at least several of the bistros would not be able to capture all the outdoor dining they have currently if it's non-adjacent to the building, and therefore do we need to adjust the language in item 3 on the resolution?
I think that question might be deferred to our city attorney more, or Mr. Valentine. Mr. Courier, would you like to, since it's a legal language, I believe, unless you advise otherwise, Mr. Courier, as to the comment made by Mr. Henke earlier. Go ahead. I think Mr. Valentine wanted the floor. 1 second. Go ahead, Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in regards to that comment, there are, I think, discussions ongoing now with regard to the Liquor Control Commission. I have had prior conversations with a representative that has contact with the Liquor Control Commission in regard to the prior permit that they approved for this year, allowing this outdoor dining to go through the October 31st period. And unfortunately, we exchanged some calls today. I did not connect with her, but I expect to tomorrow to get a better understanding of where the LCC is at. She's been my contact with the LCC to kind of carry our issues forward. And I know she's spoken to the chairman of the LCC, and she was going to report back on that discussion, but unfortunately we didn't connect. So I guess I'm unclear right now in terms of what exactly their position is. We're proceeding under the arrangement that we're just replicating what we have already. If there are changes that come that do impact this arrangement, then we would certainly have to address those with you. But it is our intent to comply with whatever the LCC regulations are so that we are consistent with their authority as well as ours. So at this time, I'm comfortable moving ahead with the resolution as it's written. But in the event that there are changes, we will then have to comply if there are, in fact, substantive changes that we need to be consistent with. But again, at this time, it's unclear exactly what their position is.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine.
Mr. Courier has anything to add.
Mr. Courier, do you have anything to add?
Mr. Valentine is absolutely correct. The prior rules from the LCC has been had to be totally adjacent to the building. They've been playing with or discussing, does the interest have to be adjacent? They talked about the social distancing concept and things of that nature, but nothing has really solidified that we could be very definitive about it at this point. And we are controlled in this regard by the LCC rules. It's not something we can overrule them on. So Mr. Valentine was absolutely correct.
So Mr. Curry, may I add, just for clarification, if things change in the future with the MLCC, with the motion we have tonight, it wouldn't affect or impact any future amendment or change to the agreement to comply with the MLCC. Am I correct?
That's correct. The MLCC is going to control what we could do in outdoor dining. It's not, we're constrained by their limitations. From everything, I think Mr. Valentine could verify this as well, from everything we have learned through our various EOC meetings and talking to health officials, this isn't going to be over for some time. So, December is not going to be a cutoff date. We're looking into well into 2021, if not 2022, before we're out of this crisis. And that's, if I had a crystal ball, I could be much more accurate, but we don't. But that's the estimates. If they get a vaccine, they got to produce it, they got to inoculate it, and the virus is going to mutate, and then they got to do another one. I'm sure Ms. Kucherick, being a nurse, could add more to that than I can. So,
thank you very much. Mr. Valentine, would you like to add something?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I would just add that for consistency, I mean, obviously it's our intent to comply with whatever the LCC rules are. So if you wanted to amend the resolution just to simply say in accordance with the MLCC standards in general, I think that would address whatever they agree to. We would obviously then comply with, and then there wouldn't be any issue going forward. So if you wanted to make an amendment, that's what I would recommend.
Yep.
Simplicity.
That was exactly my point. Commissioner Sherman, since you made the motion, what do you feel, or the rest of the commission, how do they feel about this?
I would support revising number 3 to cut off after the Michigan Liquor Control Commission standards. And I would actually add, as they may be amended from time to time.
Let's support that.
Yes, Alex, our clerk, are you clear with the motion? Should you repeat the motion to be clear with the amendment?
Yep, I've got it. Do you want me to repeat it right now?
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so it's the resolution adopting the temporary COVID off-season outdoor dining standards to take effect October 21st, 2020, in compliance with the LCC standards and as it could be amended from time to time.
I want to, Mr. Valentine has his hand. He probably want to suggest something. Go ahead, Mr. Valentine.
Well, I certainly think that would work. I would propose that just in the resolution, we just amend number 3 to say outdoor areas must comply in accordance with the Michigan Liquor Control Commission standards, and just take out the language that says must commence adjacent to the establishment.
I like that
simply
better.
just leave it
I like that better.
more open in that regard.
That was actually what I was suggesting.
Correct.
I thought so.
But I would add, after Michigan Liquor Control Commission standards, I would add as may be amended from time to time. Because if they do change their standards, we want to be able to adapt to that without requiring an additional resolution.
All right. Awesome. So we have an amended motion and seconded. Commissioner Hoff, go ahead, please.
The amended motion pertains only to item 3. The original motion is a resolution adopting the temporary COVID-19 off-season dining, outdoor dining standards to take effect at October 1st. Is that correct?
Yes.
The amendment only pertains to item 3 of the temporary outdoor dining standards. The overall motion approves the entire document of standards.
Correct.
So what you can do is adopt the resolution as amended.
So what we have to do is adopt the resolution as amended.
Don't we have to approve the amendment?
The amendment, if I may, the amendment is to the resolution. The motion is to adopt the resolution. So what I'm suggesting is that the resolution that we are looking to adopt is as we've changed it, not as it was presented.
Correct.
Approving the resolution as.
So that's approving the resolution as amended.
Correct.
That's exactly what okay. All right. So any other discussion? None? All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Sherman,
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita,
Yes.
Commissioner Host,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Ballard,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoff,
Yes.
Mayor Boutros.
Yes. Thank you, Alex. With that, we move to item D, which is a resolution authorizing continued free parking to continue in the 5 municipal garages from September 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020, and required monthly parking permit holders to pay a one-time fee of $100 by November 30, 2020, in order to retain their status as a monthly parker into the new year. With that, we have our staff. Is it Ms. Ecker or our Assistant Manager, Tiffany Gunter? The floor is yours. Unmute yourself, Ms. Gunter. Oh, we can't hear her. Make sure your audio is on, Ms. Gunter, or she's frozen completely. Connection. I can hear her screaming at the computer, but not sure what's happening. She can't hear us. We can't hear you, Ms. Gunter. Unfortunately, let's try it one more time. If you can dial in, Ms. Gunter, on the phone, if the screen don't work. There we go. You're connecting to audio right now. Give it a second. No, not yet. Give it a second. For some reason, it's not connecting, Ms. Gunter. Ms. Gunter, if you can hear me, why don't you turn off completely the computer and start to log in on Zoom again? But I'm not sure if you're hearing me. Here we go. Here we go. I think she's connected. Unmute her, please. Now push the unmute button, and I think we should be fine. There we go.
I called it a completely different way, and I think I succeeded. Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, good evening, Ms. Gunter. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Sorry about that. I thought I had called in, but I did it separately and attempted to log in, and I guess I just kind of subbed that. So back to the business. As you all know, back in March, when the shelter-in-place order was put in place, our municipal parking decks and on-street parking were essentially vacated completely. And in April, the city granted free parking throughout the entire parking system for both on-street parking and in our municipal garages. We know on-street parking revenue operations resumed on July 1. And right now we're seeing on average about 70% occupancy based on what it's 30% less than what we've seen in years past on average. So we have a lot of on-street, which means our transient usage is pretty high. However, in the parking garages, which have remained free, and we have agreed to do that through September 1st, which would expire approximately next week, we haven't seen the same level of occupancy return to those garages. What we've seen is it varies because, uses are different. There's more office spaces concentrated around certain garages and more recreational spaces such as parks and restaurants around Pierce Garage. So at Chester, we see about 10% occupancy day to day in the garages, and at Pierce, with our highest use garage, it's about 50% occupancy on average. 40 to 50% is what we're seeing in there. And we have, of course, employees and businesses using that garage more aggressively than in other areas. At the other garages and throughout the system of the municipal decks, we have about 30% occupancy on average from day to day total. Just wanted to give you that as background so you kind of understand what the usage is currently. I think you all are very aware we were hovering around the 85% occupancy on a regular basis last year, and now that has been reduced by, well, way more than half. As we started thinking about what's happening coming up September 1st when these COVID relief initiatives begin to expire with respect to parking, staff really wanted to look at, what is that occupancy? What does this mean in terms of revenue? I've heard a lot of people use the reference to crystal balls and time machines, and we don't know what's going to happen and how long can we sustain this. But in that, we wanted to balance our rationale and reasoning with our continued effort to support our downtown businesses and being sensitive to the challenges of the employees who are working from home at the same time. So the APC, the Advisory Parking Committee, met last week, Wednesday, to discuss some options for further relief efforts beyond September 1 that would go through the end of this year, trying to look at all of those different dynamics and understand what our impact would be of particular options. So staff, when we presented this to the committee, shared that, just for framing, the idea for the September sunset on the relief initiatives was that we hoped or thought that possibly we would be returning to some form of normalcy by now, which obviously such is not the case, and it remains unclear when normal will return again. And also that in the meantime, we wanted to be mindful of how our decisions would impact the parking fund. We see now that since making the decision to eliminate revenue operations in the garages, that the parking fund has been reduced by approximately $1.5 million between April and August 1 of this year. So that is something that we did not want to take lightly or sweep over without having some meaningful discussion around that. And the other issue that we have is that we really can't collect meaningful occupancy data. I think you've heard me state before this commission that we have loop information for entries and exits into the parking garage. And with the gates open, no one's wanding their parking pass or putting in a credit card. So we don't know the duration of a user's stay, and we don't know the profile of our parking population any longer, at least not since April, before April of this year. So we just know when people come and when people go. So we have aggregate data, but we cannot do anything to really understand what usage is with respect to our long-term parkers and our short-term parkers. So we were looking to try to find a way in which, and with our options, try to find a way in which we can collect some of that data again, because without it, we're kind of operating a little bit blind here. And then the other considerations were really just not knowing how long this would last. So with that, I'll just quickly go over the options that were presented to the committee. Option one was, just one second, I closed my screen here when I was scrambling to get back on with audio here, is that we would just simply continue with the free parking in the garages through December 31st of 2020. Obviously, there's a revenue implication there, and that we would also be unable to collect occupancy data if choosing to go with this option. Option number two was free parking in the garages from Friday through Sunday, with a half price discount for permit holders, monthly permit holders, which already have a significantly discounted permit, but we would reduce that even further by half, and then charge for transient parking from Monday through Thursday so that we can begin to collect some of that data and also collect some of that revenue that we're not collecting today. Not in any significant amounts, as I stated before, our occupancy is at about 30% of what we would have seen from last year. So it's just really more so that option was geared really more so towards the data side, which may not be the right timing for now, that we'd be concerned with data, obviously. And then the third option was to just simply return to regular normal revenue operations and no further discounts being given as a result of COVID, which we have seen some communities do, but those communities really don't have a reserve of any sort, and they do rely on their parking revenues to support their general fund. So they're situated much differently than the city of Birmingham. So as we had the conversation with the committee, it was a pretty robust discussion. We really came to a somewhat of a hybrid of option one is what's being presented to you this evening for consideration and discussion. And that is to continue with the free parking in the garages for the full week for transient parkers. And that would be a really great support to the businesses and the downtown and to the employees as well. We did have some discussion about the permit holders and what that would mean for them. It is a privilege to hold a discounted parking permit pass, which they agreed with, and what they came to was continue with the free operations, but in order for a monthly permit holder to retain their pass, they would pay a one-time fee of $100 to ensure their place and their parking pass would remain active in the new year. So that is essentially what they came to. The $100 amount was really just sort of thrown out there as a placeholder to try to come up with a number that made some sense. I will just fully disclose it was an arbitrary number that was selected by the committee. And definitely we can adjust it. There are 3,800 pass holders in our system. So the idea was it was roughly 1 month's worth of revenue that potentially could be recouped if every single pass holder decided to pay the $100 one-time fee. We don't know what that number will be. We don't know how many people will relinquish the pass. The downside of that is failure to pay that one-time fee would result in forfeiture of their pass. So that is the recommendation for this evening. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So I'll hand it back over to you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gunter, for presentation. Very clear what we're doing here as an ongoing effort, as we're doing for many establishments. We're also trying to add more things to help the business people in our town and the people. But go ahead, Commissioner Hoff.
Yeah, I have a question for Ms. Gunter. In the report, it states that the combined income of lost revenue for both transient and monthly permit parking has been a little over $2 million. Then later in the report, it says total impact of projected revenue lost over last year would be $1.6 million. I'm not quite clear on why there are two different amounts there.
So I want to make sure I'm clear on what you're referring to. Earlier in the document, I talk about the $20 million at the beginning of June 2020 for our fund balance, and that it was reduced to $18.9 million.
No, I'm talking about your statement, your summary of August 24th. Third paragraph, you say the combined impact of lost revenue has been $2 million as of August 1st.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Okay.
I got it. Mm-hmm.
Then when you give option one, you said the total impact, option one, in projected revenue lost over last year would be $1.6 million.
So that's a 6-month time frame versus a 4-month time frame that we're looking at. And we're not going with full free parking for on-street any longer. So there's a reduction there as well because on-street is now being paid for.
So the $2 million is for
what's already occurred.
The combined impact of lost transient and monthly permit parking has been $2 million.
So, and again, those numbers are a tad misleading. I tried to explain this in the document. I have to have some baseline to work from. So I'm using last year's numbers as a total loss to show worst case scenario. But because of the fact that I'm not at 85% occupancy, that is unfortunately overinflated number, but I don't have another baseline to use truly. So that $2 million is a comparison to what last year's occupancy would have been had we been collecting revenue.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Gunter from the commissioners? From the public? None? All right. Thank you, Ms. Gunter. Commissioner, any entertain any motion? Any? You don't like the resolution, Commissioner Hoff? Go ahead.
I'm not making the motion. I'm asking, at one point on August 19th, the proposal was to allow permit holders to retain their permits for a fee of $35 per month. And then on August 24th, it's to require monthly permit holders to pay a one-time fee of $100.
Right.
How did that change?
Okay, so that $35, that was part of option 2. And that was the hybrid option where there would be paid parking Monday through Thursday and free parking Friday through Sunday. And in order to provide some relief to the monthly permit holders, we were offering a further discounted rate from the $70 per month to $35 per month. The committee did not choose to go with option 2. They went with option 1, but they also understood the value of that parking pass, and they wanted to apply a fee, to a one-time fee, not a monthly fee, but a one-time fee in order for pass holders to retain their monthly permit. And that's why there's a distinction. I know it's a bit hairy, so I apologize for that, but they wanted to offer, it could have been a $10 fee to retain your pass. It could have been a $1,000 fee to retain your pass. They went with the $100 number. And I said before, it's a fairly arbitrary number, and we can have further discussion about what that means. The idea behind the $100 is it's roughly what would look or appear to be about a month's worth of revenue in the garage system would be collected if every single pass holder chose to keep their permit.
Does that mean that the pass holders who are not using their pass because they're working remotely would still have to pay $100 to retain their pass?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. That is the idea that the committee wanted to put forward.
Okay, other questions? Commissioner Baller?
I just feel like, I don't know, I'm just throwing this out, that I like, we have a commodity, parking, to sell, but we're not selling it, we're giving it away. And for those who are using it, I just feel like they ought to pay for it. And if we want to give away parking 2 hours, 3 hours free to shoppers, that's fine. We've always done that. We could increase the amount we give to shoppers and diners and people like that. But if somebody's using our parking like they are on the street, they're paying for it. I don't see why we don't charge for it in the decks. So I kind of like the idea of going with the option 3, but then if we felt there was a need to provide relief to someone who now had to pay for something or pay more than they could afford, let's say a retailer or a restaurant who doesn't have any passes and they need to park their employees. And if we could somehow work out a system, where they could get some relief. But, I kind of go to start with what the market is. And the market is, we have this parking, let's sell it the way we always do. The big problem is these passes, the permits, and I don't think we're helping the situation by letting people keep those. To me, that whole system needs work. You have, people, you have this disparity because there's this waiting list, and people who before COVID who might have the permit and get discounted parking, but somebody who was on a waiting list couldn't get it, and now they're paying full price. It just seems to me if they want to have, and then you have people hoarding the permits too, property owners and business owners. And it seems to me if you just told them they had to pay full price, and if they didn't want to use it, they could turn in the permit. You don't need to park. So I guess I'm just, these are just ideas. There's no, I don't have a strong feeling to push it this way, but I'd like to hear some discussion, because I don't understand why we're continuing to support these permit holders. Not all, we're continuing to support the ones who are hoarding them, the ones who, and we're supporting the almost unfair benefit that they get from having a permit when somebody else doesn't. Maybe this is an opportunity to cull the herd, get some of those permits back, reduce the waiting list. And $100, if I had a permit, that's nothing to keep it. Thanks. I'd be like, thank you. I was afraid you were going to take it away from me, or you were going to start charging me, $75 a month, in which case I'd really have to think about whether I wanted to keep it. At $100, I don't even think about that.
Thank you, Commissioner Baller. Any other discussion, comments? Commissioner Sherman, unmute yourself, please.
Thank you. I couldn't unmute. It was required the host to unmute me. I think this falls in line with what we were talking about under the last item, which was dealing with the off-season dining standards. And this affects not only the transient parkers, but also the merchants that are downtown. It affects the residents that use the parking decks, and it affects anyone who comes into town. So I don't have an issue with it under these circumstances, providing a little bit of assistance to the businesses, to the residents, to the transient parkers, and giving them something that we have. And yes, it is an asset that we can use, and it is an asset that ordinarily does earn money, but it allows us to provide some assistance to the local economy that otherwise wouldn't be available. And by charging for it beyond the suggested $100 per permit, which I think will, while there was some indication that some wouldn't think about it, and I think a business that may have a few hundred employees, they are going to think about it. If they have a few hundred permits, they will think about, do they need all those permits at $100 a piece? So I think this is a good resolution, and I would move it forward.
Are you making a motion, Commissioner Sherman?
I just did, yes.
All right. Any second? Seconded by Commissioner Host. Are you seconding that?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Now we have a motion and seconded. Any comments by the commissioners on the motion, please? Commissioner Host, go ahead with your comment.
I'd like to respond to Commissioner Baller's comment about the $100. I think that is an opportunity to possibly cull some of our long waiting list. The second thing is, I truly think we're in the same position we were in May when we did this. And as such, I think it should be continued because we don't have any idea what's going on. At least that's my opinion.
Thank you. Any other comment on the motion? None? By the public?
No, I have a comment.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Baller.
Yeah, I think it's important that we be very explicit about what this costs. So there is a cost to this. When we allow the bistro, when we allow restaurants to put outdoor dining structures, it's at their expense. We're just giving them rules to work by. This has actual dollars attached to it. And I would venture to say hundreds of thousands. We're already over 1 million, and I think we're going to go, we could probably see that go a lot farther. So this is very much money out of our pocket. So let's be clear. Let's not make any comparisons with something that doesn't cost us a dime. And again, I'm not sure I'm arguing one way or the other than to discuss this in the context of the cost to us. So there is significant cost here, and if somebody came forward with a proposition to spend, I don't know, $500,000 on this, 200,000 on that, $1 million on that, I guarantee we'd be giving it a lot of thought and a lot of study, and we wouldn't just be, jumping in there. So I'm not going to support the motion. I think it requires more study, more discussion, and frankly, I'm disappointed that one more time, we've been brought something right up against the deadline. The deadline for us to do something on this, if we're going to do anything, is September 1st. We don't have the luxury of time here. We could have, because I think September 1st has been on the calendar for quite some time. And we could have looked at this 2 or 3 or 4 meetings ago. But we have a management structure of the parking system that requires things to go through the advisory parking committee. And so I'm just really disappointed that we have to make this decision on such short notice and in protest of the process and of what I don't think is a very good solution. I'm not going to support the motion.
Mayor Pro Tem Long.
I would agree with, all of our concerns. I think that this is not a perfect situation or a perfect motion, but I do concur with the fact that it's something we can do to support the residents. It's not just benefit to pass holders, it's also benefit to transient parkers, and anything we can do to support the restaurants and the retail and even the offices downtown at this point is welcome. I am not particularly concerned about the loss of revenue because if the occupancy in the decks was 30% system-wide, which is probably optimistic, the revenue loss is projected to be $490,000. But if every one of the 3,800 pass holders paid the $100, that brings in $380,000. So the net cost to the city would then be about $110,000 in net cost impact of this motion. And I do feel that because the APC did add this $100 commitment to maintain your pass, it will have the added effect of culling unused passes out of the system, which would be a not intended but welcome benefit going into the spring when hopefully demand for those will come back.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Long. Other comments on the motion, guys? Commissioners, anyone? Nope. Public on the motion? Seeing none? All right, bring it back to the commission for last word. Don't see any further discussion. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Sherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Host?
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long?
Yes.
Commissioner Baylor?
No.
Commissioner Hoff?
Yes.
Mayor Boutros?
Yes. Okay, with that, we go to our last item under new business. It's a resolution to add an item under the last item of new business entitled Commission Items for Future Discussion. For the commission to raise topics for future discussion. if passed by a motion of the commission. That I'll leave the floor to our city manager, Joe Valentine, to give us a little background on that. And the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. As you will recall, last Monday, we had a workshop with a registered professional parliamentarian to talk about parliamentary procedures. And as part of that presentation, there were some items that were identified as opportunities to improve our process here in Birmingham. The one that stood out as one that would require commission action was one that we would amend the process on the agenda to establish a new item under new business to allow for future discussion items for the commission. So I wanted to bring that forward for your consideration this evening if you're inclined to support that. Effectively, the process that's been outlined by the parliamentarian was that if there was an item that the commission wanted to move forward or have discussion on, they would bring it up at the end of new business, in which case, if there was a majority support by the commission, it would be added as a discussion topic to the next meeting agenda, where the commission would then have discussion on that item and determine and provide direction at that point to the administration as to what they would like to see, and then that item would be brought back before the commission. So under that process, what's before you this evening is a resolution that would allow for the agenda to effectively be amended to add that to the agenda under new business as the last item to address commission items for future discussion. So happy to answer any questions. I think you're familiar with the discussion last week. But effectively, this is just bringing forward that suggestion that that item be included as an item under new business as a standing topic under or on your agenda.
Okay, Commissioner Sherman.
This was one of the things raised by Coco Seward that, as the city manager said, was probably the most beneficial thing that we could do to alleviate some of the issues that we were facing. So I'm going to move the suggested resolution with one revision, that the topics raised for future discussion aren't necessarily put on the next agenda, but on the next reasonable agenda. So if we have a situation where there are multiple public hearings, for example, on an agenda, it may be postponed one meeting to something where there's a little more time to actually talk about something. So it gives the city manager a little bit of flexibility as to, it doesn't necessarily have to appear on the next agenda.
What does it say?
I'll second the motion. And also, I have a question. This,
go ahead, Commissioner Hall.
this motion doesn't specifically say that it has to be the next meeting.
Correct.
Correct. I only raised that because the city manager indicated that it would go on the next meeting's agenda.
Oh, well, there is no timing in this resolution, and I would agree that there shouldn't be a time frame.
Exactly.
Okay, motion is clear, seconded. Any discussion on the motion by the commission? Commissioner Baller, go ahead.
Yes, this is an excellent move. I wholeheartedly support it. I think it's a great move forward for this commission to give its members an explicit time to raise issues and get them on the agenda. It's long overdue.
Any further discussion on the motion? How about the public? Mr. Bloom, go ahead. Mr. Bloom, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Go ahead. We have a motion.
Thank you. I think this motion is a good idea and a response to an issue that's been created or existing. What I would say is that in terms of Commissioner Sherman's proposal to amend the motion, I think it is okay and reasonable to allow for flexibility in rescheduling the item, but I don't think it should be left up to the city manager's discretion either to indefinitely extend discussion. And so I think it would be appropriate to allow for the commissioners to agree on when that item should be brought up, so it doesn't end up taking a very long time to come back to the commission.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Bloom. Any other public comment on the motion? I see none. I bring it back to the commission for further discussion.
Well, so where are we on the?
Well, we have a motion already. It's not being amended. That's the motion we have in front of us. But I'd like to make a suggestion myself if I don't see any other hands here due to respect of the procedure. I don't see any commissioners discussion. I want to just actually suggest, and not to make another motion as we have already a motion on the floor. This is a suggestion for future, for the sake really of us, as most comments been made that support this motion, that the intention here is to really run a efficient meeting, and also at the same time have the right preparation by our staff, as the intention of Commissioner Sherman by saying not the next meeting. But this is a very good point that he brought up, and I'm going to elaborate on that myself. But just a suggestion to the rest of the commission, food for thought, is instead of us moving, making a motion with every meeting that we have, with an item that we're all not aware of, or being surprised with, or any issue that we might have that other commission are not aware of, I suggest that we do have a list of items for near discussion, future discussion, urgent discussion, whatever issue that we might have for the next year, for the next month, for the next couple of years. We bring it back for us as a collective commissioner discussion to prioritize these items. So therefore, it will eliminate a lot of motions to be made, or motions to be made in the order they come in with no surprise of us. It's almost like a workshop session where you have a list of items, how we give a joint session with us and the planning board, and we prioritize our list. By us making that, create that list, and then we bring it back to the commission to prioritize each item on where need to go and what need to be discussed first. Then we make the motion to discuss that item on the next agenda. It would, again, create more efficient time of our meeting tonight. It's almost 11 o'clock. Therefore, we're prepared. We give the staff the right amount of time to gather the information you request. They're more prepared ahead that, hey, next month I have the trees colors to be discussed. As Commissioner Baller stated earlier, he did not support a motion because he believed did not have enough time. So therefore, eliminate all these from happening. Our staff, from city manager to any department that need to gather any information for us, they plan ahead. That would be very productive for us to make a very wise decision because we have all the information of us. But this is for the sake of the discussion. I just want to see, and I don't want to elaborate too much on it, if there is a consensus to do so. And that's related to the motion. I don't want to move the motion. I don't want to eliminate the motion. I just want to hear on that thought if there is a consensus to do so. Commissioner Sherman.
Kind of building on that, isn't that the idea behind the long-range planning meeting? It's to go through issues that the commission and staff think are going to be coming down the pike over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, so that we have a brief understanding of those issues. And if we use this to facilitate the preparation of that long-range planning agenda, I think that long-range planning will actually become more effective.
So in other words, you're saying it will help.
Well, that's exactly right. The whole idea here is there are issues that are coming down the pike that maybe a commissioner sees that we haven't anticipated yet, bring it up. The idea is to get it on an agenda. During that discussion, one of the things that we can decide is that this is something that's going to require more in-depth study and should be part of the long-range planning agenda so that staff can prepare an appropriate response, and then we can properly plan for it when it comes to budgeting.
Commissioner Host.
I just want to add that I think this might be the perfect scenario for our next workshop. I would hope we would have workshops ongoing, but this would literally put in priority what everybody is trying to get on the agenda, or as Commissioner Sherman said, it would also help the long-range planning because we haven't had any input into either the agenda or the long-range planning.
Other thoughts from other commissioners? Mayor Pro Tem Long.
Mayor Boutros, I agree with your direction. I think that's a great idea. I think that probably effectively some combination of more effective use and more input for long-range planning, and then the flexibility to adapt and bring things up intermittently throughout the year. Because we're not going to obviously be able to anticipate everything, just as nobody saw this pandemic coming, but we've reacted, I think, very admirably and very nimbly. So I think all the suggestions are good, and we should remain flexible about how we implement this.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Long. Any other thoughts from commissioners? All right, with that, we'll call the question then. Will Alex please call the roll call?
Commissioner Sherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Hall?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long?
Yes.
Commissioner Baylor?
Yes.
Commissioner Host?
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita?
Yes.
Mayor Boutros?
Yes, thank you. All right, with that, we'll, before we end our new business, I guess, officially I should ask tonight, since this passed, any commission items for future discussions? Commissioner Host, go ahead.
You know, this is a wonderful resolution we just passed, and in keeping with it, I think since I consider, you know, after some of our commissioners, 11 o'clock hour, that it would behoove us to consider a motion. And in this case, I would like to make a motion to move tonight's city staff report, the legal services memo, to an agenda item on our next commission meeting.
Okay.
I'd be happy to explain why I think that would be a good motion to support.
Any support?
Should I make arguments or?
No, your motion is very clear, Commissioner Host. Any support?
I will second that.
Okay, Commissioner Baller. We have a motion to discuss our legal service memo by city staff and our next meeting to be put on the agenda. And seconded by Commissioner Baller. Any other discussion on the motion? By the public on the motion? Commissioner Baller, go ahead, please.
I was waiting for Commissioner Host, who would have the opportunity to speak first on his motion. I just want to be clear what my perception of his motion is, and that is we do have this report. And I think it needs, there's a lot of questions that I have about it. And I don't know that merely putting on the agenda to discuss it will advance. It may be that we need to discuss it a couple of times because I think just getting, I think that there's going to be some research necessary. And I don't think by putting it on the agenda to discuss next time, this gets right to what you were talking about. It's like, so we want to warn everybody that we're going to talk about this, and we want to give the staff a heads up so that they can do research, but we're not really telling them what research needs to be done. So we're going to have to talk about it at the next meeting, at which point we might come to some agreement about further action on it. And, this is years of government moving slowly. So I want to make sure that Commissioner Host and everybody else understand this the way I understand it.
It's very well understood what we had just accomplished tonight. If you may allow me to be more efficient and finish our meeting on time, and I'm trying to cut anything short, it's very clear. We just passed a motion, was recommended by one of the most professional parliamentary to us, and we all agreed on that you move the item, you make a motion, which is respectfully, there is a motion on the floor, seconded by yourself. Now, this is when you discuss. Next time, when we have it on the agenda, this is when you say, what are you trying to discuss and what are you trying to accomplish? And then that's when we collectively as a commission, you have support for that discussion to move along for whatever you're trying to accomplish. Then this is where the information is going to be gathered. So there will be sufficient time. That's why I suggested if we do the list of issues all ahead of time and we prioritize them, we're never going to be jammed on time like this. So yes, please be patient with that. We have a motion. Let's not have a discussion on tonight. We have a motion to be discussed for future reference. Any other discussion on it?
Yeah, let me just.
Our city manager would like to say something. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I just want to be clear in terms of what the expectation is coming back, because I've heard, I think, two different things. One of which was to bring this item back for an action item, and the other was to bring this back for discussion. So I just want to be sure, and I'd ask Commissioner Host to maybe restate his motion for clarity so that we're meeting the expectation when this comes back. Thank you.
I have made a motion to move tonight's city staff report, legal services.
We can't hear you, Commissioner Host.
My motion is to move tonight's city staff report, legal services memo, to an actual agenda item at our very next commission meeting. And can I explain why?
Commissioner Host, if you don't mind, you got cut off completely. I did not hear it at all, but go ahead, repeat it one more time.
Okay, the motion is to move tonight's city staff report, legal services memo, to an agenda item at our next commission meeting. Did you hear me?
I heard it very clearly.
Okay.
Mr. Valentine, is that clear direction?
Yeah, we'll be following the process to bring it back for discussion.
Yes, we'll be following the process to bring it back for discussion. On that, any other discussion on the motion? None? Will the clerk, Commissioner Sherman.
I guess I'm a little confused. I thought that what we just passed was basically commission items for future discussion to determine if they should be discussed on a future agenda. So the discussion that would happen next time is whether we want to have a discussion about the legal services memo, not having a discussion on the legal services menu. So I'm just a little confused as to what we just did. I think that what Coco had suggested was that we were going to bring something back to decide if we were going to actually discuss it.
That's not how I understood it.
I never used the word discuss, Mayor.
Okay,
And but that's my point. That the idea was to bring an item back for future discussion, whether there's a determination that we want to have a discussion. I guess what I'm asking is, do you want to have a discussion on whether to bring back the issue of legal services? Is that what you're looking to do?
I am asking to move it to the next meeting precisely because it should be an agenda item and it should be worthy of lots of discussion. And I'm trying to get you to bed. You know, that you don't want to be after 11 o'clock. Well, this, thanks to the parliamentarian, we now have an opportunity to maybe see that you get to bed at a decent hour. We do. I actually don't care. I'm happy to stay until 1, 2 a.m. in the morning, but this is such an important issue. I think it's only fair to the public as well as to our city attorneys that it not be at the end of a meeting as a staff report. Maybe that's what it actually is, but for our purposes, it should be an agenda item that the public is allowed to be in on it unless they didn't want to stay until 1 a.m. So that is my intent,
all right,
Mr. Mayor.
let's not have another discussion. That's the reason.
May I suggest this then? Commissioner Host, maybe we should postpone that and ask city staff to bring it back as an agenda item, as opposed to doing a motion that's contrary to what we were, the intention of what we just did.
Mayor, would you
It has
have
the same
me explain
effect.
contrary?
The end results is the same, I believe.
Correct. But what we're doing then is using the new tool that we have correctly, as opposed to starting off using it in a manner it wasn't intended. The normal way we would do it is postpone it. Mr. Baylor, please control yourself.
That's okay. I mean, Commissioner Sherman, I appreciate your comment also. Again, the purpose of this, not to spend time on a further discussion. We do have a motion. We do have a second. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Host,
Yes.
Commissioner Baylor,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherman,
Yes.
Mayor Boutros.
Yes. Awesome. With that, we move to our next item on the agenda, which is item removed from consent agenda. We have none. Communications, we have none. Reports, commissioner reports. We have a notice of intention to appoint to the Design Review Board, a Historic District Committee, Parks and Recreation Board, and Museum Board. Plenty of boards that we welcome people to commit and volunteer their time to help out. Next, item B under reports, we have commissioner comments. Any comments? Commissioner Hoff, go ahead, please.
Yes, I just want to recognize City Manager Joe Valentine for reaching out to Michigan Department of Transportation, requesting enhanced pedestrian crossing to increase the safety as a result of a recent tragic accident on Woodward. And he sent a letter, and I thought that was very good, asking for MDOT to give some consideration. So I want to thank you, Mr. Valentine.
Thank you for your comment, Commissioner Hoff, and thank you, Mr. Valentine. Go ahead, Commissioner Host.
Commissioner Hoff, you took my thunder away. I was going to write Joe a nice long letter about the pedestrian crosswalks there. you know, just based on everyday life, so to speak. Anybody that's over at Speedway and wants to go back to Brown Street, or, you know, they're going to have taken their life in their hands. And the point of what I just said is thank you to our city manager for being so proactive to have already tried to address this with MDOT. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Joe.
All right, that's a great ending for Mr. Valentine tonight. Congratulations and thank you so much for all you do. Any other comments? All right, with that, we go to advisory boards, committees, commission reports and agendas, legislation, city staff that been moved. I should say a motion made to be put on the next agenda, and that's information only. And I would like now to ask, as this is an unusual ask, but let's start on the right path. I like it that it's only 13 minutes past 11, and hopefully the next meeting would be 13 minutes before 11. But let me ask one of the commissioner, please, if you may make a motion to adjourn, as suggested by our parliamentarian, Coco Seward. May I have a motion to
adjourn?
Seconded.
Commissioner Nikita made the motion to adjourn the meeting. Commissioner Sherman seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Nikita, Commissioner Nikita,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherman,
Yes.
Commissioner Ballard,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Host,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long,
Yes.
Mayor Boutros.
Yes. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Meeting adjourned.